Hey everybody, happy Monday. Welcome to another work week here. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon and sitting in for Alan Schimmel, and welcome to a brand new edition of TechStrong TV. We have an amazing lineup of interviews for you today. Lots of great folks on the show. We start with a couple interviews that Alan did. The first one with Manoj Nair from Metallic. Metallic is the Commvault offering that is making a huge impact on delivering cloud security to companies. And so Manoj and Alan talk about what's happening with Metallic, what's happening in the cloud security space in general, and really discuss the market at large. A good discussion, worth checking out. Then Alan also has a conversation with Max Bruner from Zendesk. They talk about Zendesk's inclusion in the Unity partner program. Unity is a real-time development platform, and the combination of Zendesk and Unity together is really going to have an impact on development as we know it. Zendesk is bringing the mobile app development support to the Unity platform. So good stuff, worth checking out. After that, we have our monthly installment of GitLab's The Lab. Brendan O'Leary comes on and he has a discussion with Niazi Erdogan, who is a senior DevOps engineer at Roche. They have an interesting discussion, definitely another one worth checking out. Then in our Something Old segment this week, we have Gary Berman's Cyber Hero Adventures show. This one is on the topic of cryptocurrency, and that is definitely a timely topic. He speaks with Paul Lee, who is the CISO at a company called Uphold, and they talk about cryptocurrency and what's happening in the space in general, and some of the danger signs for businesses as they, perhaps become cryptocurrency victims themselves. Let's see. After that, we've got, I come on for a news update that I do with every episode. So check out that. And then after that, I have a conversation with Brian Rozek, who is with Optiv Security. He and I discuss how the COVID-19 and the work from home transition have dramatically increased the risk of insider threats. And, insider threats, obviously, for many organizations really wasn't something that was on their radar when they sent all of their employees home at the beginning of the pandemic, but it's actually the risk of insider threats has increased dramatically since COVID began, and we're talking about what that means for businesses and how they can help defend themselves against insider threats, especially as more organizations decide to work remotely full-time all the time. After that, I talked with Jerry Ray. He and I speak about what's been happening, what happened last week with the Capitol insurrection at the Capitol building, and really what that means for cybersecurity at the federal government level, because apparently during the raid on the Capitol, there were some documents and devices that were stolen by the rioters. And we have no idea at this point what that actually means, what was actually stolen, and what information was on those devices. So we're going to be talking a bit about that, about what the fallout might be from that, not just with the data itself, but perhaps changes in cybersecurity policy at a national level. So please definitely check that out, that conversation that I have out with Jerry Ray. Then I do the webinars preview. As always, I let you know about 3 webinars that we have coming up that I think are worth your time and taking a look at the webinars. And then after that, we've got Mitch Ashley, as always, doing his Analyst Corner. He speaks with Rocket Software's Tim Wilging, who is the Chief Architect and Strategist, and Peter Fandel, who is a mainframe open source evangelist. And they talk with Mitch about advancements in the use of open source software with mainframe applications and tools. And we've been talking about mainframe and DevOps for a while. Mainframe and open source, not so much. So I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. They talk about some of the long-held beliefs around mainframes and really kind of pose the challenges that maybe some of those long-held beliefs really aren't true. And they also talk about how open source software is increasing in mainframe environments and just in software development environments in general. So good discussion, definitely worth checking that one out. Finally, we have an interview that Mike Vizard has with AppNeta CEO Matt Stevens. They talk about how working from home impacts network performance. That seems like a gimme, but there are a lot of factors that need to be considered in the work from home environments and networking and bandwidth considerations. So Mike and Matt kind of parse through some of the things that organizations need to consider with their work from home employees and the productivity and all of the implications surrounding that. So as I said, we've got a great lineup for you today. I hope everybody can stick around and join us, but we'll be right back after this commercial message. Hey, welcome back. First up, we've got Alan's interview with Manoj Nair from Metallic, talking about cloud security and Metallic's impact on cloud security. So let's give this one a look.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. Breaking some big news this morning involving one of the hot companies in the DevOps, CI/CD, Git space. Let me introduce you first to our guest, and we'll jump right into it. First of all, from Orange Business Services, we have Philippe Essauguet. And if I mispronounce Philippe, I apologize. But why don't you say it correctly so our audience at least hears it one time?
So my name is Philippe Essauguet.
I think I did a good job then, man. I'm proud of myself. Joining Philippe and I, thank you. Joining Philippe and I is Steve George. Steve is the COO of Weaveworks. Steve, welcome.
Thanks very much. Much easier name to deal with. Two first names.
Well, it is. It is. You know, one thing in the tech world is there's certainly no lack of a diversity of names. You know, we got to, I take it as a personal challenge to do my best with them. But anyway, of course, Steve, Weaveworks is famous or well known in our, niches as the company really who kind of pioneered the whole GitOps movement, which is really now accelerated. But more than that, right? Cornelia Davis and the team at Weaveworks has been doing a bang-up job for a number of years. And we're here today to talk about an announcement that came out this morning, significant new investment in Weaveworks. Steve, I'm going to let you kind of break the news if it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so thanks very much. Yeah, we've been working in the GitOps space for quite a while and helping to work on the management problem of cloud native. And that's seen us working with some quite large enterprises. And so today we're really pleased to be announcing some new investment around C with 36 million. And that's been led by a number of key investors. So AWS, Deutsche Telekom, Ericsson, Orange, and Sono IM. And then that group has come on board as new investors with our existing venture investors in the form of Excel, Google Ventures, and Redline.
That's fantastic. That's quite a lineup too. Congratulations to you and to the whole Weaveworks team, Steve. Before I jump over to Philippe and ask him, I mean, obviously from the names you mentioned, there's a heavy telecom presence in that investor group. Why, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the general direction of travel, I think, for cloud native and Kubernetes has been, we're seeing it move to become the sort of enterprise application platform. And that's leading to a lot of new complexity in how people want to use Kubernetes. The sort of, both from an application perspective, like many clusters being used with enterprises that have, large numbers of applications. Also in terms of the clusters themselves, thousands of clusters deployed in many situations. And we see that in both, the cloud and also on-premise. And so for the telecoms sort of investors, what they're seeing is a future where they need to manage thousands of clusters through a software-defined approach. And GitOps, really gives you these amazing management properties when you want to do that. So, I think Philippe can speak to it more deeply, but I think that's the sort of central narrative about why they're so interested and then have joined in investing in Weaveworks.
Excellent. Philippe, there was the lead in. Tell us.
Okay, so there are a lot of points that will echo what has been said by Steve. Basically, for us, we think that we are clearly at a momentum where technology has never played so much important role from business perspective or worldwide location. And we are really excited around innovation and business agility, opportunities enabled by cloud native GitOps and what a company like Weaveworks can bring to a company like us, but also for every transforming business we may support. And there are a lot of important points raised by Steve that was to deep dive. The first point is that we are absolutely convinced that cloud native for us, it's not an evolution, it's a revolution. It's the depth is broader, and we are basically managing our DNA for the coming 15 years. It's a game changer for telco, for network, as well as for digital. And for a company like Orange, who have assets, I would say, into the end user consumer market, as well as on the B2B market, we have to cover the full spectrum. And because cloud native will be the de facto, I would say, cloud operating system, we have to answer to the infrastructure complexity challenges raised by Steve. It's true for us, but it's true also for all the customer we are supporting on the B2B market.
Agreed. What I find interesting as well is the global profile of not just the investors, but of what's going on in terms of the cloud native GitOps world. There was a time, I'm old, right? I've been in the internet since the internet was commercial. And there was a time where you would look at places on the map and say, okay, well, this place is about 18 months ahead of where this region is. And this region is about a year behind that. And this region, it's 2 or 3 years away from really being able to use some of this stuff. That's out the window. Today, things are really happening. I don't care whether you're in Europe or the US or APAC, Australia, New Zealand, India, the Middle East, EMEA, everyone is at pace, it seems. Everyone is wanting these digital transformations, right? Whether it's B2C or B2B, everyone recognizes that, this transformation needs, as you say, Philippe, it's revolution in terms of the urgency, right? You can't afford to be late to this party. Otherwise,
Yeah, I
you
think
may
that's
not
totally. Yeah,
be
I think
around
that is
for the
totally
party.
true for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we see it across different customer sizes as well, or user sizes, and not just like in the past. To echoing your point about geography, the other thing we've seen in the past is that perhaps technical leading companies have been ahead, or certain segments have been ahead. But I think with cloud native, what we see is pretty much across the board, from very traditional enterprises through to B2C. Everybody really sees the importance of that cloud native transformation at this point.
And Alan, if I may, perhaps just a comment on the last thought about from Steve. There are two remaining information that for us are super important regarding the WeWork investment. Is that basically we are a moment of our story within cloud native where deployment can be the only target. We cannot separate deployment and operation. And it's very interesting to see that we are currently moving from a DevOps world to a GitOps world. And what's the very interesting point with GitOps is that you put at the same level the need to industrialize your deployment as well as your operation. And for company where they are more and more challenged by their market, the need to scale is obliged, I would say, to be covered by the two activities at the same time if we want to scale at the right pace.
I agree with you, Philippe, for sure. I guess I have to ask the question: what role do you think the COVID pandemic and everything? It's been an interesting year. What role do you think that's played in this, hastening the revolution, if you will?
I mean, I think we see that. I mean, it's not a business as usual period. And in these times, we get them, from time to time. There have been others like it before, but in these sort of difficult times, it means that people have to find a fundamentally different approach. So there's not as much room for incrementalism, and that can be very, very challenging. But it has accelerated cloud native, and it's accelerated new ways of working and new ways of thinking about the problem. That's not to underplay, the sort of difficult human challenges that we're seeing for whole industries at this point in time. But it also is an opportunity for cloud native to demonstrate its capabilities across the board, because people are working. Even if they are, not using traditional cloud infrastructure, they're now increasingly using a cloud-like approach. So that is continuing to drive that transformation, I would say. Philippe?
Yes, I think that on the COVID-19 side, what we observe is that it has been a super accelerator. And basically, what we observe is that resiliency make company take cutting edge decision that they would never taken before. And that's why we need to scale fast, scale safe, scale, I would say, with a lot of consistency and coherency. And that's why an approach like GitOps and a coherent tool set can help company to scale around all those topics.
Agreed. God willing, COVID, of course, doesn't stay around as pandemic forever, right? Let's hope by a year from now, it's in the rearview mirror. Yeah. Vaccines are out and available, and people are not able to get on with their life. Do you think we'll still see this rapid time only in physics, time only goes one way. You can't run time backwards. Time goes forward. Technology too, right? You don't see technology going backwards very often, never. But it doesn't necessarily have to go as fast. So do you think how do we sustain this pace? Or should we sustain this pace? Is there a point where we should kind of gather in the wagons and take stock of where we are, let best practices evolve? Or do we just keep going forward as fast as we can?
Well, I think what's important for us at Weaveworks around GitOps is that we see it as being an operating model for cloud native. And I think the reason why that's important is because we want to come through on the promise of cloud native. And the promise of cloud native fundamentally is that we can do more through automation, and we can do that reliably. So we want to deliver a better, more productive, more agile, more reliable application development and application operations experience. So there is a tension there to the fact that, people need to develop for want of a better word, the muscle, the capability to be able to do the right things. And we've all been in the industry long enough to know that sometimes the industry over-promises and under-delivers. So I think what's really important for GitOps and important for us as Weaveworks is that, we're putting the maximum energy that we can into making sure we understand the challenges of digital transformation. So if you're just starting down cloud native, then we want GitOps to help you. If you are running many applications, we want GitOps to be able to help you. And if you're running many clusters on a global scale, across multiple different cloud backends, then we want GitOps to be able to help you as well. So I think it's important that we come through on that promise, and it's not just another technology bubble. And so far, I think. I hope that Weaveworks and the cloud native community, I think, has done a really good job on making sure that we keep to that promise. Philippe, what do you think?
Yes, I perfectly agree with you, Steve. And basically, I think that we all remember the pendulum movement. We have the mainframe client server, the cloud computing, and the edge computing. We are, I would say, something between cloud computing and edge computing. We have to manage in a same manner with the same global orchestration tooling from central cloud up to edge node. Node can be in the network, node can be at customer side. And what we absolutely must tackle and manage is the underlying complexity with a high level of coherency and consistency. And one more time, it's why Orange Ventures for Orange has decided to invest it into Weaveworks, because we are absolutely excited by the potential of what can bring Weaveworks on these topics.
Excellent. Philippe, I have a question for you. Of course, Orange is a huge telecom business provider, services provider around the world. Most times when we see companies investing, it's VCs investing, and the investment is to make a profit on their investment, right? I invest $1 to make 10. But in this case, this is more of a strategic investment. What does success look like from Orange point of view with your Weaveworks investment?
It's a very good question, Alan. So basically, we have in front of us challenge in terms of modernization on telco, on network, as well as on digital. And when we are observing the trends, all those space are converging into, I would say, the cloud native space. So for a company like Orange, who have to manage, I would say, infrastructure and cloud within all these versatile environments, we absolutely need to move with an industrial and professional approach. And that's why we truly believe that the tool sets and the methodology that Weaveworks can bring into the table can really also support us. It's true for our own transformation, but it's also super important to never forget that we also support the B2B market of our customer, and I would say worldwide. And all the methodology that can apply for us can basically be used to support the transformation of most of our biggest customer around the world that have to face exactly the same challenges.
Fair enough. Good. Guys, I told you that time goes incredibly quickly. We're way over time, but I wanted to make sure we got that last point in. Steve, again, congratulations to you and all of the Weaveworks team. So really, I mean, beyond the magnitude of the amount of money, the lineup of investors here is truly impressive. But it's also impressive with what Weaveworks has done, right? I'm a fan, obviously. Philippe, I think you guys made a good investment here, if I say so myself. But we'd love to hear more about what Orange does over the months ahead. Please come back and visit with us.
Okay.
But for now, we're going to call it a wrap. Weaveworks announced $36 million in new investments. Here on TechStrong TV, there's Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, welcome back. Next up, we've got an interview between Alan and Max Bruner from Zendesk talking about Zendesk's inclusion in the Unity Partner Program, the real-time development platform. So let's see what they have to say.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment. Got some interesting developments to talk to you about in this segment. My guest is Steve Tech from Dynatrace. Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm doing well, Alan. How about yourself?
Good. So, Steve, for those in our audience who know about Dynatrace, they probably think of them along the lines of maybe mainframe software, software in general, the developer tools kind of software, or maybe ops software. But you're here to tell us about a new and exciting new chapter in the Dynatrace sort of pantheon, if you will. So why don't you do that? But before you do, Steve, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I lead the product team at Dynatrace. So it's an R&D function within the company, but I spend a lot of my time not only internally with where we're taking the offering, but also with customers, our alliance partners, technology vendors, and really out there as much as I can be within the market to understand problems, unmet needs, and what people are looking to accomplish with cloud native technology.
Fantastic. All right. I think we beat the drums enough, Steve. Why don't you tell our audience what's the big news from Dynatrace?
Yeah, the big news, and we're really excited about this, is that, as you said, Dynatrace has been known more in the monitoring and observability space, and we've just entered into the application security market.
Excellent. Excellent. Why? How?
So it's similar to what we've seen as enterprises go to adopt cloud native technology. The existing tools and processes really aren't made for modern environments and the speed that people are trying to drive with Agile. And we made this shift from an on-premises software company to a SaaS service started 5 years back and have gone through continual reinvention. And our customers, a lot of times, are trying to drag us into the security space, talking about the quality of the data, the fidelity of the data that we had. And we resisted for a while. It was out of focus. It was out about our own transition that we were going through. But through that process, we did come to realize that the existing application security offerings on the market really weren't built for either the speed that people are trying to drive with continual delivery, or they generate some gaps and blind spots when you go into more dynamic multi-cloud environments.
Absolutely. I mean, so Steve, I've been in the security space myself for about 20 years. We called it InfoSec. Now everyone calls it CyberSec. But about, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago, AppSec became a huge focus, the focus, right, around security, where a lot of people said, you know, if it wasn't an AppSec, it didn't mean anything. And there's been no shortage of companies and probably tens and hundreds of millions of dollars raised by companies trying to tackle the AppSec issue. You've laid out in a good case for why things are different now, speed, you know, velocity, and so forth. But why? What makes you, you know, why is Dynatrace building a better mousetrap here, for lack of a better word?
No, it's a great question, and the thing that we found out, and as we were exploring the space, we looked at, you know, the alternatives out there. But one of the strengths we have is that we're actually able to leverage a lot of our core platform capabilities today. So it was not like we had to start from scratch and build back up. There were items that we believe are unique secret sauce items to the Dynatrace platform that lend themselves well. Maybe to share a couple, you know, with you, just to give you a little bit of insight. Yeah, so one challenge that we saw with the traditional approaches to application security was just coverage, how to get the instrumentation embedded throughout the lifecycle, production and pre-production environments. And one of the core patented technologies that we have, we call it the One Agent and Pure Path technologies, but they give automated instrumentation, whether it's a Kubernetes environment, digging directly into and instrumenting the processes running within the containers, but in an automated way, without any really manual steps and anything that might slow down that process. Maybe one other example is also, as we do for observability purposes, we have a real-time view across any dependencies, all the different software logical components across multi-cloud environments. And we saw that this use that we applied for problem root cause analysis, enriching CMDBs and others on the observability side, was really what organizations needed for a real-time precise impact analysis to understand if a distributed transaction was exposed to the internet, if it had access to crown jewel data, things of that nature. So in summary, there are just many items that we've already invested in that are proven out at enterprise scale that we're able to apply and repurpose within an application security use case.
Excellent. Steve, our audience is probably a very unique mix that's kind of perfect for you in that, you know, one large part of our audience is the DevOps audience. DevOps folks, and all that entails, including DevSecOps. And then, you know, another part of our audience is the cyber audience. Well, again, with a heavy emphasis on AppSec and DevSecOps. So they're pretty savvy, they're pretty knowledgeable. Talk to us specifically. You know, we've become conditioned with AppSec stuff where you have static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, IAST, and I forget what that stands for right now, but IAST analysis, you know, web application firewalls, another aspect of AppSec, though, kind of post-deployment.
Sure.
Where does the Dynatrace, you know, new portfolio here, where's that new product? Where does it fit in there?
Yeah. So maybe I can take a swing at that from talking about what we saw in our own process, what we've done with existing customers in their production environments. One of the compelling pains that we found was that they didn't have great insight into what was running in production environments. And it wasn't that their pre-production scanning, whether it be SCA or the static analysis or other areas, aren't needed, aren't sufficient, but there's just such a fast pace of change in terms of not only managing all the different pipelines that they have in pre-production, but what happens when you have a rollback, something is, you don't catch it as you push it back forward into production again, or new attack vectors that are introduced post that scan. So that was kind of what we saw from a really traditional approach to scanning software in pre-production environments. They just weren't able to catch everything that was in a production world. And so then when we looked at the production side, we'd look at things such as, there used to be ways that you could get at it from the network, but with modern encryption, perfect forward secrecy, there's just no way to really look at it from that view. And then I go back once again to the point of people try to go at it from an application standpoint. We had a kind of a first generation of RASP products, but customers were not confident in their ability to run agent instrumentation at speed and at scale, which once again plays back to one of those secret sauce items that Dynatrace has. And so when we look at that market landscape, we do want to be providing value across the life cycle. Of course, if we can help catch problems before they enter into production, all the better. But that blind spot was the inability to really understand what vulnerabilities were potentially in their production environments and be able to catch those on a real-time basis. And so that's where we see the offering kind of fitting within the overall landscape. And definitely DevSecOps is where we see this world heading. Our traditional audience was DevOps. We're still within kind of that same team and ecosystem, but it is a new stakeholder for the Dynatrace audience.
You speak of stakeholders. One of the interesting things I've seen, Steve, in the DevSecOps space is that traditional security companies coming into DevSecOps, shift left, all this stuff, are recognizing that it may be the security stakeholders, the security team whose budget this comes out of, or who has to sign off an approval. But the actual tools themselves are being used by the DevOps folks, not necessarily the security folks.
Yeah.
Is that true with Dynatrace?
Yeah, that's been our experience. So just for context, although we're announcing the offering today, we've been working on it for about 2 years now internally. It's been running internally for about a year in production. And we've been working with early adopting customers in their production environments over the past quarters. And so we've had a chance to see some of those patterns play out. And yeah, we see DevOps and DevSecOps. For them, it's all about how can they maintain speed, how can they deliver these capabilities, but there always is, to your point, that CISO budget that we are working with. And we see the need from their standpoint just a little bit different. So it's a C-suite care about in terms of, are we confident in what's running in our cloud native environments? Are we sure that if there's a potential exploit that we're able to catch it, quantify it, and address it? And so this value proposition plays out on both sides. It is more collaborative, but on one side, it's the confidence and the risk and the compliance mindset, while on the other one, it's let's not let any of that slow us down from really meeting that need of what we want to do from an agile basis.
Fair enough. And this was released actually this past Tuesday, today's Thursday. And so information is up on the Dynatrace website for this?
It is. Any information that you need around kind of value, recorded demo, walking through those kind of key use cases that we're leading with out of the gate.
Yep. Steve, can you talk to us? How is this priced? Free would be nice, but how is it priced, and how can people get their hands on it that way? What is it going to take?
Yeah, well, so the great thing is we're starting with really going after our existing customers. I mean, it's a natural spot to learn and for the collaborative efforts. And the great thing for them is that this capability is already part of our observability agents in production. So it's literally a feature flag that they flip on, and they'll be able to get that information that brings together the development team and the security teams in one spot. Now, from a pricing and packaging standpoint, a while back, we went with a very simple, transparent mode where we tie to application workload pricing. So similar that you'd get out of a public cloud provider, or on-premises OpenShift or something along those lines. So it's really mapped to the RAM or the workload pricing. And then for our existing customers, this is about a 20 to 30% uplift to give them that real-time security view on top of their full stack monitoring capabilities.
Got it. Makes sense. Steve, so you know what they say, you can't be a little bit pregnant when it comes to security. Actually, I don't know if they say that. I made it up. But Steve, where does Dynatrace go from here on security?
Well, that's something I might hold back on just a little bit, but we're really excited about this being just the first step in that overall mission. So we see the runtime and self-protection capabilities to be natural. It's a very strong fit with our insight into applications. But we're excited about expanding that full stack. We really think that Kubernetes is someplace that we'll continue to invest further in. And then also the automation capabilities that we drive within that. So even better than detecting items in production, say using things like automated quality gates to detect these items pre-production so that they never actually get out into the wild and you're able to preempt those problems. So expanded scope, expanded automation, and more full stack insight is what you can expect to see Dynatrace deliver.
Fantastic. Steve, we're about out of time. Congratulations entering the AppSec market. It's a pretty, it's a dynamic market. It's an important market. And God knows we could use good solutions there. So congratulations to you and Dynatrace on that. Come back and keep us informed about how things are going, okay?
Will do. Thanks you very much, Alan. Appreciate having the opportunity to share the news here today with you.
No, it's our pleasure to have you on here. Steve Tack from Dynatrace about the very latest AppSec solution in the marketplace from Dynatrace. Go check it out. Until then, though, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our next guest. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Next up is GitLab's monthly installment called The Lab. Brendan O'Leary is talking with Niazi Erdogan of Roche. Let's give this conversation a listen.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another edition of DevOps Unbound. We have a really great DevOps Unbound topic to explore today, and that is, that testing is not a monolith. We a lot of people, especially people who aren't familiar with testing, just say testing, QA testing, and we think of, oh, it's a test, and and we know there's different kinds of tests, but do we really know all the different kinds of tests that would need to be done? As we're developing and deploying and managing and monitoring software and applications and so forth? I don't think so. I think really, we could cater this show to those of you out there who do know, but I think today we want to talk a little bit to those who don't know as well, and let's try to get you educated on what some of the various aspects of testing are that you may not be familiar with. They're important nevertheless, and how they influence what you see in the apps you use and what we may see going forward. Got a great panel to introduce you to today. I'm going to allow them each to introduce themselves. Let me first start off with Leandro Melendez. I can't say it with that Spanish roll of the tongue that you can, Leandro. I apologize. And Leandro's known in the industry as well as a name, but I don't want to steal his thunder. Leandro, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. And don't worry, you made a great pronunciation of my name, way better than what I'm used to. So that was pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, repeating, I'm Leandro Melendez, a performance test manager from Qualitas Group, and as well known in the internets as Señor Performo, as you will said, Performo, strong R's. And we provide several services to, my specialty is performance testing, integrating it right now with all continuous integration, DevOps, and agile methodologies. But as well, and you mentioned it very well earlier, it starts to permeate in other areas of testing when you start to do it holistically and at a large scale and thinking on all of the steps on the SDLC. So we will talk a little bit more about it. Last thing about me, as I said, Señor Performo. In the internets, I have a YouTube channel. I try to help educate people on especially performance testing, but anything that comes testing and methodologies, agile, DevOps, and all that. I'm very happy to help provide information, and as well as here, whoever gives me a chance to speak and share the knowledge, I'm very happy to.
We're honored to have you here, Leandro. Thank you. Next, we're going to introduce Ken Pugh. Ken Ken, you introduce yourself. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Hi, I'm Ken Pugh. I've been in the programming software development field for about 2/5 of a century, and in Agile for about 1/5 of the century, and doing everything from gathering requirements to final testing. I've got a book out called Lean Agile Acceptance Test Driven Development, Better Software Through Collaboration. And I've been teaching, training, and emphasizing acceptance test driven development / behavior driven development for the past 15 years.
Fantastic. And for our fraction challenge, friends in the audience, 1/5 of a century is about 20 years. So to give you a little idea. Next up, we have Christine Fisher. Christine, welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Christine Fisher. I manage a team of BAs, QAs, and UX at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. My team and I have been on a journey with behavior-driven development over the last 2.5 years. And as we get ready to talk about testing here, my big secret is I've actually never been a tester. I just have managed some, but with our jump into DevOps, I felt very strongly about advocating for what our role should be and how the work should change to keep up with the other changes that were happening with DevOps, which helped lead us to BDD.
Fantastic. In pre-COVID times, we'd say, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But we can't even say that anymore. Last but not least is my co-host and anchor on our show, Mitchell Ashley. Mitchell, why don't you quick introduction?
I don't know what fractions I've worked, but I do know that I used that joke last night and my family had never heard it. So, so much for the Holiday Inn Express joke. But no, I'm an old software person, started in software, and have done lots of things around both cloud as well as I've also been on the vendor side. So in network security, and SaaS services. So testing people are some of the most unique and, in my world, beloved people, because those are the folks I really look to say, how are we doing? Where are we? And I think even more so in the DevOps time. So I'm excited to explore this with you all. So thanks for joining us.
Fantastic. So first of all, let's assume that our whole audiences aren't test experts. They're more DevOps generalists. There's a good spattering of cybersecurity folks, cloud native, infrastructure ops, and we're throwing out some ADD, behavior driven, BDD, that they may not be familiar with. So why don't we do a quick, kind of definition? And we're going to ask the non-tester, if you will, Christine, if you wouldn't mind leading off with, what are these references we've made to these types of testing?
Sure. So when we're talking about behavior-driven development, we're talking about understanding the behavior of the end user and understanding what the workflows are, why they are trying to accomplish that task, and working on testing, understanding the requirements, testing those requirements in that way, not just writing a requirement, developing a requirement, testing a requirement without any true understanding of what the person who's going to use the software on the end does. And when I talk about not being a tester, more on the functional side with requirements as a BA, things like that, that was always the interesting part to me. And then sometimes we would test something and it would be tested correctly, but we still miss the mark. And so having the whole team understand what the end user wants to do, putting it into common language, that's really important for behavior-driven development.
Agreed. Ken, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so one of the big things in behavior-driven development or acceptance test-driven development is having the triad, and Christine sort of made a reference to it. The customer, developer, and tester get together prior to implementation, create the scenarios become the tests, and the developers are given those tests to run against their code. And those tests are the agreed upon shared understanding of how the system should work.
Got it. Signor Performo, is that correct? Yeah? See?
Very well said. Yeah.
Signor Performo, how does, acceptance-driven, behavior-driven development figure into your performance testing kind of regimen, if you will?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this type of concepts permeate in all the testing practices, if I could say. And very well, as it was said, here I like to call it the three amigos, that you put them together, and even before you start rolling anything, drafting anything, you get the requirements well together with what you are going to be testing and what has to be marked as passed before you even, or a developer can mark a task as completed. And I might have said it wrong, a developer, because in general, you're supposed to be a team and everyone is responsible for each element. And this comes together with performance metrics, where in general, most of the people, when they think about performance, their mind go right away to load tests, when I have to put hundreds of users to slam a system, where if you see it from the beginning, as well as some of these requirements, when you generate them, that, I don't know, give an example, that the text field has to just allow a certain given of characters, or be this color rounded, little definitions like that. It should have included performance metrics as well inside of it, so that when you are generating any piece of software or functionality, it's measured there and then. I have to say it's an issue that I found often in the old waterfall days. I would arrive to do a load test after 6 months of development and start to automate some things that I'm like, hey, everybody, this is visibly slow. I'm the single guy. I don't need to load test it. Why no one caught this before? And those are the most general problems in terms, I think as well in functionality, some things that come from even unit tests, low level tiers, where you could catch many of those bugs and performance SLIs that are not met. And that's how it integrates a lot with performance. I always preach that you need to start to think about it as early as possible. And as Christine mentioned, getting the people together. What are the goals? What is the user gonna require? And what are the tasks? Because not everything should respond super fast. Not everything should or can have a good response. I mean, we'll wish that monthly billing period can be closed in 3 seconds, but that's just for a response time from a click. So we need to filter that out depending on what is the user needing, willing to endure, to call it in a way, and put it together. And this permeates as well. It's some sort of functionality like, yeah, I need this to respond in this period of time for me to be comfortable using it, for it to be useful, functional.
Comments, thoughts from the team?
So as you were mentioning that, I don't know if you're familiar with healthcare.gov. I think I think they should have had a few performance tests done well before they released it. It seems like I don't know that it was like maybe the day before they went, I guess we're going to have a lot of people on this.
Yeah, and I think and to paint and explain what I was saying, with the single element that doesn't perform well, that doesn't work well, even from the initial tier, they should have created these requirements saying, like, I don't know, when I log in and enroll healthcare, start the process, when I click this, it should respond this fast. It should not do, I don't know, these many full table scans, connections to the database, things that you can go way, way low level in the IT tier. And others, and it's just like, yeah, the user should not wait more than 5 seconds on that click. Single user, one person. I am almost sure that most of the problems that they had was that they didn't start to tune that, and they allowed the developers to check in all that awesome code, to call it euphemistically. And that's when you start to scale up problematic things, is when everything derails. And yeah, healthcare.gov. Aside of not doing good load testing, they had multiple issues at the single piece level. And that's where it is, push it left. Start to think at a unit level, single item, requirements. When you have the three amigos together talking about these things, take everything into account, and don't let your little post-its to be marked as done and move to the next area of your board without covering some of those basic requirements, which most of people doesn't think about or include them, or whenever, and this is a little BDD or TDD, when the developer is working on it, should have in mind all those requirements, functional, performance, security. And that's where I say all this permeates to all the testing areas and other metrics when other areas of testing are doing their tests, manual, functional, automated, even security. My goal is to start to gather performance metrics so that everything happens together and we don't have to wait until the end for big load tests to figure out that healthcare.gov will have what happens, sadly.
So actually,
good.
No,
Ken,
so actually,
sure.
you were talking about something that I've done a few blogs on this, but it's been around for a while, is the testing matrix, i.e. that shows, since we're talking about testing is not just about functionality, it describes all the different sorts of tests, from the functionality tests, which are on one side of the matrix, to the quality tests, which are on the other side, including performance, security, usability, and so forth. And that your testing, I mean, ATDD and BDD tend to concentrate on the functionality, because we're going to be talking with the customers, that's what you want. But you ought to have all those other tests, the performance tests, as you're mentioning, already established ahead of time. 100,000 users, how fast should it be, and so forth. Oh, and in fact, just the usability you were talking about. How long should it be after I click that I get to the next page? And those things can be established ahead of time. And if a developer ends up and it's not meeting it, well, he knows to fix it. We don't have.
And I would say here, not only established, but worked on from day one. Because as you mentioned, even some usability, security, those start to be checked when everything is assembled. And there are many techniques that we can start to embrace, starting our automations at different tiers. As I said, I am a big proposal or supporter of, yes, have unit testing automated everywhere, have the coverage according to the pyramid. Don't focus so much on manual front end or after the fact, leaving everything for the second Friday of the sprint when everyone wants to leave. And here, tester, there you go, start automating. Yeah, that's where everyone has to start to work together and pushing it left. Since day one, start thinking about performance, security, functionals. And even some have told me like, yeah, but there are things like, as you said, usability that cannot be done until the end. Well, you can start creating mocks. You can start figuring how things should work and start to work them. And again, I think the mindset of keeping testing phased waterfall ways, we need to start to work everything out par and get it rolling. Yeah, I totally agree.
I'd like to speak to that point a little bit with DevOps and with the testing. And we've been talking about a team and we've been talking about getting people involved. And what I was seeing in my organization, when we first started talking about DevOps, is everybody is an engineer. We can all do these jobs, things like that, right? And that jobs might change. There's room for everybody, but what you're doing might change a little bit. But that can be really scary to hear. And especially if you are a manual tester who really doesn't have an inclination or desire to learn automation. And that's okay. Like, that's a different conversation, but I am always a proponent of manual testers. So one of the reasons that really pushed me toward that is hearing that conversation, seeing people on my team, being told that their job might change, but we don't know how. You're an engineer, you can do what everybody else on this team does, but that's not true. Not everybody has those skills. And so making sure that the team is involved, and when you can have these conversations, BDD, all of these things that we're talking about now, right, are getting the testers involved in the conversation earlier. And that makes them part of the team. And we have taken our BAs, we've taken manual QA, we've taken our automation QA, we get them all involved in that conversation. We make sure the developers know where they are in the process. We make sure the developers are adding to the conversation and part of that process. And it was really important to me in that DevOps environment to get out in front of that and help define that role. When somebody is saying, we don't, again, your role might change, but we're not quite sure how. I wanted to help my team define that and put us in a good position. So we weren't just sitting there to have, God forbid, a developer come down a few years later and tell us, now you do it like this. We wanted to put ourselves into that position, and having those conversations, I think, is such an important part of that, and changes some of that dialogue a little bit about, we can all do the job. We can't, but we all have important jobs to do to make it work.
Christine, I think about just an analogy, robotics for surgery. I still want that doctor in there guiding what's happening, right? We don't need any bad things happening. Well, same with software. Some of the worst folks at testing software developers, right? You're just too close to it. Even if you're writing the automated tests, to your point, and I think several of you made this, it's an opportunity for us to collaborate much more closely together, rather than testing to be the thing right before documentation at the very, very, very end of the release, right? Which is what it used to be. But also, what do we automate? It doesn't help to automate the wrong tests. Let's get the right things in there. And where's the user in the customer, in performance, in functionality, in speed? By the way, one of the things that kind of baffled some development teams when I would say speed is quality. They're like, what do you mean speed's quality? It's like, well, if Netflix takes 3 seconds to start your video, okay, that's good. If it's pausing for 3 seconds every 5 minutes, that's bad, right? So speed makes a difference in terms of the perception of the experience. So it is a really kind of a harmonious effort where we have to bring all of that together.
And on that you mentioned, I'm going to play a little bit devil's advocate towards and against at the same time manual, where some forums that I participate here in Mexico talk about that a lot. Like, hey, too much automation. Are we manual testers going to be out of a job? And the machines will replace us and all those paranoid ways of speaking. And I generally explain to them with analogies. I like a lot to use analogies. In New York City, before there were any automobiles, cars, there were lots of horses, and horses produce a lot of stuff that was dropped on the streets. And there was a job needed for that to pick up some of the horse. And I'm sorry if this is an analogy of manual to what the horse produced, but the point that I'm trying to do is that once cars become available, that job decreased considerably, but we still have places where there's people that work with the horses, maintain them, brush them, and do all those tasks, which as many cars we may have, we won't ever have a horse polishing machine or anything like that. There are things that truly a human being is the only person that can do it really well. Manual testers are very good for those tasks. I think on the other hand, there are too many things that are tried to be done with manual testing. I have seen in many organizations that there are tasks and tests that could be pushed left, that could be started to be done before, automated programmatically, and leave whatever is truly necessary, and where the manual testers are going to be the rock stars and the only ways to do it, allow them to. So I think, yes, I would suggest most manual testers to start to pick up a little bit on technical and developing, yada, yada. I think in the modern days and upcoming times, everyone should know some sort of development and should be on schools. And we're moving into a technological world at a pace that whoever doesn't pick it up might be a bit handicapped. But on the other hand, the skills of a good manual tester, when you have that clinical eye to say, hey, I see there, or you don't even have to touch the application and say, most probably it accepts fields that it shouldn't on that field. And most of the times they are right. And you need that input. So on both sides, they won't be replaced, but they should get used to use the tools as they are. Technology is not here to replace them, but to empower them, and they should be able to use it. I think.
Skills can be enhanced, absolutely. And I agree with what you say. Nobody wants another meeting on their schedule, but on my team, we have added what we call a test strategy meeting. And we get the BA and the manual and the automation QAs in a room, and we talk about each of our stories. And should we automate it? What are we looking for manually? And they took that further than when we first started, and they came up with a scoring guide to say, what is our level of effort with this? What's the repeatability for the user? Those types of things. And they've realized that those conversations are so important. And you're exactly right. The manual testers aren't doing the same job, but now that we're able to really give them the time to pull those skills out, the critical thinking, and what you were mentioning, looking at this field, we are getting so much more quality from our tests and from both sides. And it's really been a fantastic change.
Yeah, that's great. And optimizing and in a way calling it where you get the best bang for your buck, where to use those efforts, how to use them, prioritizing, and even some things that, hey, this is not a big impact. If we get a defect here, we won't even pay attention to it, manually or automate it, or some others that this is critical. If we get a problem, it has to be done manually with 2 pair of human eyes, capable eyes to identify it, or we can let the machine do it. I mean, there are balancing on testing, and I think falling into the cognition mental fallacy of it's called man with a hammer. Someone learns how to use a hammer well, and we'll see needles everywhere and try to hammer them. There are multiple other tools that we can use when it's needed, when it's more optimal. And I think it's as you say, prioritize, distribute, and make the best effort with each one of them.
So just getting into that, one of the things in the matrix, and one thing I always suggest is that exploratory testing. You take your manual testers and turn them into exploratory testers, finding those things that the functionality tests are not going to cover. I always give an example that for those who don't know exploratory testing of you're on the web, you're ordering an item. You press the submit button and the screen comes up and says, do not hit the back button. Do not refresh this page. And the exploratory tester goes, yeah, back forward, refresh. Maybe I'll get it for free. I don't know. There's no way of telling.
We live for those moments. We get it.
Yeah, don't make any buttons red. They'll be pressed.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. But let me kind of take our conversation a little bit of a way here. You know, we're 25, 30 minutes in. We haven't spoken a lot about DevOps, which is interesting, right? Especially in light of our original conversation off camera. You know, when we talk about behavioral driven testing and ADD, you know, testing and performance testing, these testing disciplines all existed before DevOps, right? Ken, you're doing them for a fifth of a century or more, right? And you know, that certainly predates what we call DevOps. And I was here when I started DevOps.com back in 2013, 14. There were a lot of testers who were running around like, you know, henny penny, the sky is falling, that they were going to be out of a job, they were going to be obsolete overnight. And of course, that hasn't happened. Christine, you said that DevOps was kind of a driving factor in why you took the baton here, why you took this position, why you feel it's important. I'd like to bring you back, our conversation a little bit, to DevOps. How has DevOps changed BDD, ADD, right? Automation, absolutely, right? But automation is not necessarily DevOps, right? We automate it. We've mentioned a little shift left, you know, pushing it further, not pushing it further on the developer's shoulders, because as Ken, you said, we don't need, you know, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, right? We don't need that. But how can we be more efficient, better at testing? Is it just a matter of automation, or is there something else there? Christine, I'm going to ask you first because it's something that I think is near and dear to your mission.
Sure. And I think for me, really, it is the conversations. How long has QA sat outside of the development organization, right? I mean, we can bring them in if we talk about Agile and Scrum and things like that. Even again, before DevOps, we can have a tester embedded in that team, but we still have lots of organizations that don't do that. Realizing that quality, not testing, that quality is the responsibility of the entire team, and that everybody needs to contribute to that conversation. We talk about, you know, breaking down the silos and everything with DevOps, and we're all in this together, and that includes testing. And for me, that's been the biggest part. We can talk about BDD or whatever we want to talk about, however we want to test something. The most important part to me is that the testers are at the table and that they're part of that conversation.
And I think that's inherently part of the DevOps cultural kind of mantra, is that everyone should have a seat at the table. Ken?
So one of the things, getting back to the DevOps, is the fact that every time you have a test failure after something has been actually developed and put into the pipeline, means you've got to loop back. Means that you are slowing down the flow of business value through that pipeline. So the reason we want to create all these tests first is so that we pass them, and when it goes into deployment or staging, wherever you put it, that you don't get a test failure. You don't have to triage everything. And so that's why creating all of the tests first that the developers can be running while they're developing their code or in their development environment is so important. Now, I'd just like to add one more little phrase that I always use or talk about is every requirement should have a test for it, right? Pretty straightforward. Or how do you know whether the requirement is actually being met? But every test is a requirement. If you cannot ship a system with a failing test, then that test is a requirement the system must meet. One of the things that developers always complain about is not having enough requirements, unclear requirements. The tests that you create prior to implementation, BDD, ATDD, or however you get them, are the requirements. And now the developers have the test that they can go against those requirements, make it pass, and then the flow through the pipeline doesn't stop. It doesn't, you don't have a blockage because of failure later on.
Fair.
And I
on
think
that? Yep.
catching those errors, defining them, and being a bit more synergistic, to call it in a way, it's crucial. You very well mentioned all the testing practices, areas, and disciplines that exist come from waterfall and even before. But I think a shift that was forced by DevOps, any agile methodology, continuous releases, forced us to think it in a different way. And I don't know if it was the chicken or the egg, where we started to see that we needed to throw down these silos, and as well that the communication channels and capabilities to observe what was happening. Because as a tester, 15 years ago, I remember you would just receive something finished, you had no idea, and somehow you had some peculiarly written requirements that you had to write tests for and to try to figure out, but everything was already packed up, backed up, ready to ship, and you were just trying to stop like a meteorite that was about to hit, and you were like, I don't even have control. I detect something, I send it before a production release, and I have these bugs that I detected. I'm sending them somewhere. Probably the developers were even gone. All those situations that we experienced before on any testing area, that now that everything is happening continuously fast, we have feedback, we don't own only the development side, the testing side, the operation side, but we own all the loop, we're involved, and hopefully we have communication with each one of those areas. And I would say not communication, that the lines that divided us are blurry now. We are just multi-cap, T-shaped people that can jump into, hey, now this is the deal with development. On ops, I understand that this is happening. We have logs. We have different release methodologies. I think DevOps and the openness that is happening, as well as, from my perspective, performance, that I have some tools now that allow me to see into the code, to monitor it, telemetry, all these fun things that we can work with, have allowed us to evolve and to integrate, as it was very well said, from clear requirements, clearly knowing what is needed. If we detect something wherever, not only before releasing to production, but now it's in ops, there's a bug that was not caught and we catch it right away, we roll back or we release quickly a fix. Those things were forced, given those things, or I don't know if forced, again, I don't know if it's chicken and an egg situation. What came first? If now we have more visibility and capabilities, we start to release more often and communicate development and operations. But all this synergy has to happen and is needed for us to truly embrace DevOps, have quality in it, and keep releasing often with quality.
You know, Alan, I have a question I'd like to pose to the team about DevOps. You know, we don't do DevOps just for DevOps sake, right? There's usually some drivers behind it. And you think about the conditions we're in today, economic conditions, changing markets, rebuilding, supply chains, contactless services. There's a great example. In days and a few weeks, businesses had to respond. Point being, one of the things businesses are looking for from their technology, from their software, is agility, the ability to respond quickly, experiment, go after opportunity, but defensive, whatever it might be. From a testing standpoint, how do you think that's changed how you respond and how you do the work that you do, knowing that there are situations you have to react fast, and how's that changed how you work? Any thoughts on that?
Well, sorry, go on. I have played too much today.
Well, let me just give an example of a current situation. There is one place that I was consulting with. Their manual testing effort took 5,000 hours to release a product. You're not going to be very agile if it takes you 5,000 hours. That's 50 testers working over a month. And I don't even know what they did if they found a defect, whether they restarted again. So the whole concept of being agile is you need, as we talked about, all the automation around everything. Because if I'm going to make a little change to something, I want to make sure I haven't broken anything else. So I need the automation that matches exactly what the requirements are, so that then I can run it through the pipeline. If I don't have the automation, I have to pause for 3 days for manual testing. I'm not going to get things out pretty quickly.
And to build on to that point with BDD, you can see so clearly where you have a failure in your test. When I joined my current organization, they had just really started with automation and there wasn't a lot of direction there, which is fine. That is not any kind of a criticism. But those tests got so complicated and only the people who were writing the tests knew what was happening in them and where those failures were. And troubleshooting a failure could take just as long as troubleshooting the code. I mean, so taking something like BDD, we're going to build on the agility. We want to make it open to the team. The manual tester can find out where that failure was. The developer can find out where that failure was. And then we can very easily test the test to find out if it was a problem with the test or if it's a problem in the code, and then send it to the appropriate place to get it addressed. I think that piece has just been a huge improvement for what's been happening.
And I want to add as well, from what you mentioned, what's changed from the old waterfall days to how we are working now with the new trends and everything. I think the first problem that I personally experienced, and I fought against this agile stuff that started to happen. Why don't you allow me to still do automated big ass load tests before a release? How am I going to be able to keep up with this if I have constant releases every 2 weeks? And here, I think the biggest thing is a change of mindset, because many of us, and again, I said this myself, I was indoctrinated into how the waterfall days and silo phased release cycles happened. And I cannot even call it cycles. It was just like the big bang release and that was it and you're out. And you used to think that way. You had to do big cycles of automations that you could execute that took hundreds and hundreds of hours, people involved. And now you need to think about, how can I tackle this now that is supposed to happen so often, but a big change is that it's not so massive anymore. We are not doing a whole full release that we need to do multiple regressions here and there and everywhere to make sure. Now we can just say, hey, this sprint, I'm just going to release this tiny little feature that we can just quickly test. Something breaks, something happens. We are sure that our team, ourselves included, can switch direction, detect where's the issue, and implement the fix. And probably tomorrow, if we are super efficient, super quick, and doing things differently, we can recover from it. As you mentioned earlier, when there's a tons of tests that you need to execute and there's an error that you detect, it's there's a bug, but we want to release every week, every 2 sprints. Sometimes even modern mindset could be, well, let it go to production. It's gonna pester us for a day or 2, but we know that we can quickly apply a fix, release it, let it pass. It will cause a tiny bit of problems, and even change the course, change the direction if you need it. Like, hey, that's a feature we don't need, we can take it off. So all that mindset changing on how you approach testing with this has to change. It's very different. And I work with lots of customers where I jump in and like, yeah, why are you still doing these things that are a decade, 2 decades old, where all this DevOps, continuous, Agile is already happening, and you're even trying to do Agile, but you have this big bang release, huge pieces of functionality that you want to push. That's not going to help you. And you need to be paying attention constantly and enable that you can recover. Your testing needs to be aimed at enabling that tiny functionality tests everywhere and just relevant to what you're doing. It's a complete switch of mind of what was testing before and what is today.
Fascinating.
Nice.
Just that
Good,
idea
Mitch,
of being able to release software quickly, right? Instead of 6 months or 12 months. That's mind-boggling shift right there. Sorry, Alan, you were taking.
No, I'm actually saying, well, I think we're about out of time. I was going to ask us to, wrap up. I was going to wrap up, but you know what, Mitchell, I gave you the last word. That's great. Hey guys, as I said early on, the time does go really quick. We're out of time for this episode. I'd love to have you all back though. Maybe we can continue this conversation. I find it fascinating as someone who doesn't come from the testing world, right? That testing in its infinite variety has been so profoundly impacted by DevOps and Agile and these technologies. But rather than being left behind, it's been accelerated, right? Through automation and speed and quite frankly, more focus. In many ways, DevOps has been one of the best things that's ever happened to testing, right? And that's the thought I want to leave you with out there for DevOps Unbound. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll see you on our next show. We have a great roundtable coming up, by the way. Check DevOpsUnbound.com for all the latest. Thanks, everyone. Thank you to our panel. Mitchell, as always, thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Gracias.
All right, next up in our TechStrong TV segments, we've got something old. This is the Cyber Hero Adventures with Gary Berman. An oldie but a goodie. He talks with Paul Lee, CISO at Uphold, about cryptocurrency. So let's give this a listen.
Hey, thank you for joining us. We are really happy to be here. Both Wayne Ariola and Orly Peck representing Silk. And what we're here to present to you today is something that's actually a radical transformation in terms of how to manage the data layer. And it's called a cloud data platform. And from my experience in this DevOps marketplace and my experience in watching people try to speed up their release cycles, the one thing that hasn't totally been optimized is this data layer. And we want to introduce to you the concept of a cloud data platform and how it can truly assist you to increase your DevOps throughput. So just to start, we're going to talk about what is a cloud data platform. We're going to talk to you why it's critical for DevOps. We have this short little, great little intro that Orly's going to give about how its in-action assists to access environments. We're going to show you real briefly how the cloud data platform interacts with Kubernetes and how it's so valuable. And then we're going to give you a demo of it as fast as we can. We get 20 minutes for this, so we're going to try to do our best. And then we want to offer you actually an extended white paper that gives you a further description of this. So if you guys are okay with the agenda, that's what we're going to go with today. And here are the two people who are speaking to you. First of all, my name is Wayne Ariola. I'm an author of a couple books in this area, one on continuous testing, one on more or less the automation of testing within the context of DevOps. I've published multiple articles over my years. Both Orly and I are embarrassed yet proud to be in the software space for as long as we have, with Orly having more than 20 years experience in software today. I would like to just tell Orly, in preparation for this, I've truly enjoyed our time together, and I think we're going to have a great webinar. So big cheers to us, okay? So here we go. Let's introduce to you what a cloud data platform is. Very quickly, a cloud data platform allows you to abstract the data layer from multiple data sources. And whether that's on-prem, whether it's in multiple public clouds, or more likely in what we're seeing as multiple hybrid organizations or hybrid architectures, this gives you an abstracted layer to the data layer. And why is this so critical? Well, there's a couple of core reasons. First of all, and this is critical for DevOps, it's all about speed, okay? It's all about accessing data when you need it, where you need it, as fast as possible. And as you know, we're dealing in very highly distributed regions of folks both consuming data and actually updating information. So access to those distributed teams in a timely manner is absolutely critical. Speed matters in DevOps, and this is what actually the cloud data platform provides the best. This concept of actually getting you access to the critical data that you need when you need it and as quickly as possible. Orly's got some great metrics around this that we're going to share with you, number one, and number two, we also have a great demo to show you how it actually works. The second thing, and I usually mention this secondarily in my presentations, but I think it's absolutely critical, is a cloud data platform, due to the fact that it has optimization elements associated with how it actually manages the data, will save you 30% off your cloud spend immediately, the day you turn it on. This is a critical component of why you should do it, and really applies to how it's your OpEx savings. However, when we really look at the DevOps environments and enabling multiple teams, this is really where the cloud data platform gives you the level of control and flexibility that you need to achieve the speeds that are critical. Now, since we're talking about Kubernetes, right, and operationalizing Kubernetes, especially for mission critical applications, let me show you just briefly in a very high level. I apologize, we can go into this deeper if you'd like, and the white paper goes into this a bit deeper. Let me show you how this works with Kubernetes. So essentially what we do is create an abstraction of your actual data layer, no matter where it resides. It can be on-prem, like I said, or across multiple public clouds. We actually inject that node into the actual Kubernetes cluster, and what this ends up giving you is a level of control of the data layer, which you would not get if you were actually using or injecting the data source directly into the Kubernetes cluster. You would actually be limited by the levels of controls and load balancing that the cluster or the Kubernetes or the container actually provides in the first place. So with the abstraction of the cloud data platform, we give you really granular control over the data layer. And this is fully automated, it's self-contained, and the good part about it, it also gives you self-healing automation associated with the changing requests and demands for the data itself. This is where the cost savings and the optimization comes in. There's two great papers that you will be guided to if you download the white paper that we'll show you at the end of this, and this goes into full detail on how this is achieved. So why? Why is a cloud data platform absolutely essential for DevOps? And there's three things that we've been tracking over here that are across the board what we hear consistently from our large organizations. These are Global 2000 organizations who are trying to advance their either Agile or DevOps initiatives. First of all, 40% of the new demand for environments comes with dev test. This means that teams that are initiating new sprints, teams that are actually trying to move down the pipeline are actually requesting new environments at a greater and greater increment, okay? And it's actually quite interesting here because the requests for environments are actually increase almost algorithmically as you layer in new teams, or as teams actually build into more of an agile process. This is because different environments have different demands. Different demands need different parameters and different configs. The interesting thing about these environments when you look at dev test is that they're not highly utilized. They're utilized at peaks. So the ability to actually deploy and destroy that environment in order to A, optimize it, but B, also keep control over your resources in the cloud is critical, okay? The second thing is we were seeing really a 5x increase in requests for data access in the last 2 to 3 years. And why is this? Well, and not only because of the dev test demand that we've seen or we just talked about, but also because of BI and data analytics initiatives. We're seeing the request for clone data, the request for data access in order to do special inquiries or basically automate those inquiries over time. But there's no need to spin things up and totally replicate and manage all those databases when you can do it with a cloud data platform. So the ability to actually manage this incremental demand for data access across your environments is critical. And then finally, what we're seeing is that if you really look at cloud and cloud spending patterns, roughly 35% of your average waste is spent on inefficient resource management, okay? And what this means is that you are basically managing and just turning on a resource that is spinning there without necessarily fluctuating for the demand coming in or shutting it down. So this is really where we had mentioned before, this cost savings aspect of a cloud data platform kicks in, giving you more granular control over the data layer, number one, but also optimizing it across your entire environment for those requesters who are making new and bigger demands for data day in and day out. Okay, so that kind of sets it up. So in summary, we can abstract your data layer, giving your distributed users access in real time, speeding up their ability to access these environments on demand, and we could save you 30% right off the top. So with that, Orly, I've set up this conversation for you to knock it down, okay? I now think you guys are out there saying, how do we do this? I mean, is it real? And I'd like to introduce you to Orly Peck, and she's going to take you to the next step of this journey.
Thank you, Wayne. So we're going to talk on one example of the capabilities of the cloud data platform. And a common use case we often see with our DevOps customers is definitely the need to clone or duplicate environments. So as Wayne mentioned, the request for environments is on the rise, and we expect this demand to increase, either for testing, development, analytics, or any other use. So cloning and duplicating environments, as you all know, is an expensive process, and it injects a wait time to the whole CI/CD process. So we can look together at an example. Let's say you have a database in production that you now need to test in 3 new environments. This will require 3 copies of the same data set. In order to do that, you will need to fully copy this data set 3 times, once for each environment. Copying this data set may take a long time, depending on the size of your data set and on the location of your team. And in addition, each one of the clones will require additional capacity, therefore increasing the cost of your environment. So can we do this in a better way? So this is where the cloud data platform can really change the game. With cloud data platform, you can use zero footprint clones. Zero footprint clones is a unique technology that enables creating writable clones instantaneously without requiring any additional capacity. This is done without really copying any data. Since you're not copying any data, you can do it instantaneously, create any number of clones, and create new environments and duplicate them effectively and quickly. Okay, so now let me give you an example of cloud data platform in action. So this is a SaaS company that was using database clones for their CI/CD process for generating reports. The time to bring up the environment and the efforts that were required were huge. So the DevOps team decided to leave this environment up and running 24/7. Any problem or change in the environment required hours of work from the DevOps team. Using the Cloud Data Platform, this team was able to significantly optimize the report generation process in cost, time, and effort. Let's see exactly how. So using the instantaneous zero footprint clones, the team has managed to consolidate 11 data replicas into 2, saving 82% of the capacity used in that environment. In addition, since the clones are instantaneous, the time to bring up the environment was cut from hours to minutes, enabling the team to bring up the environment only when needed and tear it down when done. This was a huge cost optimization for this environment. Using the cloud data high performance, the time it actually takes to run this report was cut in 50%. And in addition to that, the compute instances that were over-provisioned for performance were downsized, and this was additional cost reduction of 50% for this cost. So overall, this was a huge cost reduction. But actually, the biggest win was on the time and efficiency of managing this environment. This enabled the DevOps team to be available for other tasks and projects that can enable the growth of their company. So now we can see a demo for a typical scenario. The scenario is a team that is requesting for an Oracle dataset to be tested in a new environment. The dataset size is 180 gigabyte, and we will see a live example of how we can use the zero footprint clones technology to create a clone for this team. Now, just remember that this is a live example of a manual procedure just to show you what happens behind the scenes. So in your environment, when you use the Cloud Data Platform, of course, you will use all kinds of automation tools such as Terraform, Ansible, scripts to fully and easily automate this procedure. Let's look at Aura 01. This is our data set where around 180 gigs are used out of the allocated 250 gigs. Now let's look at the VM itself. You can see the allocated LUN/dev/SDC with 79% of usage. Since this is a live environment, we can even log in and see that we are connected to a live database instance. Let's see that. Oops, a few typos, sorry. Okay, now let's clone this dataset so it can be used by our team. This will not affect our production database in any way. So we're going to select the volume group that holds the LUN that we want to clone. Now let's name our clone. Press OK. And then, boom, we have the clone instantaneously created. Now we can expose this clone as a writable copy. So we create a view from it. Let's call it demo view and map it to the ESX cluster. Great. Now let's go and check what the LUN ID of the created clone is so we can find it easily on the ESX cluster. So this is the view we created, and you can see all the associated LUN IDs, and we are specifically interested in the Aura data that has a LUN ID of 80. And now let's go back to the ESX cluster and do a quick rescan. Now let's mount this into the Linux VM. We will add a new device. The type is raw map device. And let's find LUN ID 80. There it is. Yep. And click OK. Now, from the Linux VM, we can rescan. And now we can find the added LUN. See that we have, just a sec. So we have /SDF. Now mounting it to Aura data folder that I prepared. And now we can actually see the data copy with the same data set and size. There it is. So this is the clone. It's ready for the team to use. It will not affect the automation. It will not affect the production environment in any way. Just don't forget, use automation tools for fully automating this whole process.
Orly, thank you for that. Hey, just out of curiosity, because I know we clicked through the interface there. So in a actual live production-based instance where you're managing that, how long would that actually take with using automated tools?
So that would be a few seconds, probably, definitely less than a minute. It's very easy to automate this whole process. So.
Fantastic. So, and even if you're looking at distributed teams, it seems like you take whatever it is, that 1 hour to 2 hour down to essentially less than a minute. Well, that's fantastic. And again, for the audience out there, if you'd like the details on this, this is going to be, go to our Silk virtual booth, and the white paper on DevOps throughput will be available to you, and the details associated with that are there. So you can actually look at the data yourself. So why don't we just try to wrap it up, Orly, and give the folks a little bit more information here. In summary, there are radical changes going on in terms of how we can actually manage our cloud instances and hybrid environments. And with that, a cloud data platform gives you that level of abstraction and control to actually take advantage and really manage your cloud environments, number one. But it gives you that flexibility. I know from my perspective and from my research, the idea of the expanding requests for environment access is really just growing exponentially. And given that, that could actually increase your OpEx expense significantly if the automation is not there, number one. But I think number two, without necessarily the ability to provide control or that control in which a cloud data platform offers, automation just doesn't matter. You need both. And I think this is why, I know this is why I'm so excited about these radical new advancements going on in being able to manage this cloud data later. So, from a perspective of a large organization looking to increase DevOps throughput, the cloud savings is immediate, right? So the optimization techniques that are available within the platform itself allow you to manage towards optimizing the environment uptime and using it in a credible way by being able to stand up and tear down. But also there's multiple optimization techniques within the platform itself that we just have not spoken about. You're going to get 10x better performance in your public cloud, and Orly showed you a little bit of an example of that. The other thing here is that we know that you need to be able to cloud anywhere now. You're not just committing to a single cloud. You really want to be able to actually port from cloud to cloud to cloud and take advantage of different strengths that each one of the public offerings have out there. In the field itself, and this is one thing that we haven't necessarily talked about in depth. But one of the biggest expenses associated with porting to cloud is actually optimizing the data layer for that particular cloud instance itself. Using a cloud data platform abstracts from that and allows you to actually port to that cloud immediately, giving you that flexibility by managing your data. And then finally, we give you this continuous automation that allows you to actually keep up with the increase in demands for these environments itself. So hopefully we've had in our brief time with you the ability to present to you something that can truly increase DevOps throughput. And we thank you for allowing us to spend this time with you. Again, each one of the vendors in this Kubernetes virtual conference has a virtual booth. And within that virtual booth, you can grab our Cloud Data Platform white paper. Again, for me and Orly, thank you so much for allowing us to to introduce to you a cloud data platform.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. Today is January 12th. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I am here now with the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that takes a look at some of the best practices around application performance testing. We all know the importance of testing in the application development process. Load testing, stress testing, endurance testing, availability testing, configuration testing, isolation testing. The list is seemingly endless, and they're all important in ensuring that an application works well and provides that ever-important user experience. So this no-frills article goes over some of the do's and don'ts in testing, what organizations should keep in mind in their testing to produce the best outcome, and other best practices that can not only help improve outcomes, but also save a lot of headaches. We also have an article that takes a look at what is needed to make AI everywhere a reality from a DevOps perspective. It's an interesting take on how different disciplines need to mesh to create opportunity. In this case, MLOps and Net DevOps must intersect to enable AI everywhere. Net DevOps evolved out of DevOps, applying lessons learned from software development workflows and applying them to network development. Ditto with MLOps, except it places the focus on machine learning workflows. As both areas focus on bringing automation, simulation, and validation to their respective workflows, together they create the perfect framework for supporting the networking and intelligence necessary for AI everywhere. It's definitely an interesting read that helps illustrate the impact of DevOps workflows in all kinds of areas. In news, we take a look at Cloudflare's moves to better align its content delivery network service, easy for me to say, with the tools and frameworks used to build applications using GitOps processes. The company recently acquired Link, which is an automation platform to help front-end developers collaborate and build applications, with the goal to simplify front-end applications with back-end services. Cloudflare is betting that CDNs will increase in popularity as a platform for continuously deploying applications closer to the point where they are consumed by the end user. Currently, that's nowhere near ubiquity, as it's not clear how much application logic will be pushed to the network edge via CDNs. However, it is apparent CDNs are emerging as an important deployment platform that should be incorporated within DevOps processes. My guess is we will be hearing more about CDNs, edge applications, and similar technologies as the need for higher processing gets pushed to the edge to enable a higher quality user experience. Over on Container Journal, Mike Vizard lays out the details of Red Hat's acquisition of StackRox, which provides a suite of tools for securing Kubernetes clusters, and F5's acquisition of Volterra, which provides a platform for managing hybrid cloud computing environments based on its own VoltStack Kubernetes distribution. Both are worth noting because they highlight the increasing popularity of containers and Kubernetes in cloud environments. F5 plans to use the Volterra technology to push computing to the network edge, while Red Hat plans to use the StackRox technology to bolster its container security offerings. As you may remember, IBM has reorganized itself to take advantage of the growing use of cloud-native technologies, and adding StackRox to Red Hat OpenShift, the application development and deployment platform based on Kubernetes, bolsters the technology platform that much more. Congrats to Red Hat and F5 for what looks to be very positive additions to their technology stacks. On Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at hyper-automation and how it can help remove some of the issues that surround remote work security. As workers are now using multiple devices to get their work done while working remotely, ensuring data security has become a lot more difficult. Hyper-automation shifts manually intensive tasks to automated processes, which will accelerate the remediation of issues before they can disrupt the network, and through machine learning, provide greater visibility into devices and behavior that may indicate a security threat. The capabilities of advanced automation, such as machine learning and predictive analytics, can help take the worry out of remote work and help IT be more effective in mitigating security risks. All right, that's all I have for the headlines today. Please check back on Thursday when I'll have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Anibal Abarca, who is the CTO of a company called Wiseline. Anibal, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, great. So tell me a little bit about Wiseline. I don't know too much about your company.
Of course. Wiseline, we are a services company. We specialize on product development, product design and development, as well as helping companies to transform and improve their DevOps processes and their DevOps capabilities so they can, what we consider digital transformation is companies how to become technology-driven companies. So adopting DevOps principles and adopting DevOps practices is super important in the product and design, the services that go together with design and product development. And we help international companies, global scale companies. We're located mainly in Mexico with most of our team, but we are a global company. We have offices in Vietnam, Barcelona, Mexico, and the US, where we have most of our customers that are Fortune 2000 companies.
Excellent, excellent. So I guess you have seen a lot in the DevOps space, working with so many companies in so many different areas. Are there certain things that you've noticed, that your company has noticed, that is kind of like a thread, if you will, that connects all these different companies? Are there certain things that maybe issues that they have with their DevOps implementations, or maybe certain attitudes and culture, things like that you've noticed that's kind of a recurring theme throughout all these companies?
Yeah, I think we have seen different scenarios, and in some cases we work also with startups or technology companies that are not necessarily very mature, and so we see different problems or different challenges, and we work with large enterprises that have legacy process, legacy applications. So we definitely find different set of problems in that space. I think something common is it's a cultural aspect, right? When we think about DevOps, it's not only about automation, it's not only about instrumenting the processes and the pipelines with certain technologies or certain techniques, but it's actually on bringing principles to the company and how to enable teams and processes and the organization in general to follow those principles and to work in this collaborative and iteratively way, so they can continuously learn and continuously find value in their business and in their products, right? So the main challenge that we see in companies that haven't transformed, it's a cultural aspect where you have different teams. You have the development team, you have the business team, you have the operations team, the security team, and they all work separately. And sometimes they don't have close collaboration. Not that they are not working together for sure, but they also don't have the right information that is shared among the different areas at the right time in a continuous way. I believe that's one of the main challenges that I have seen.
I've heard among some organizations that are trying to adopt DevOps and bring it into their organization, that sometimes the culture exists such that they kind of prefer to remain siloed, if you will. Have the developers doing the development thing and the IT ops doing the IT ops thing, and they just don't want to, or maybe they don't understand the benefits of working together to create, kind of more of that DevOps way of working, if you will. What are you guys seeing, as far as that kind of siloed approach? Is that something that's still very much prevalent among organizations?
I will say that those companies that have or are in the process of adopting cloud technology, they are definitely reducing those silos, or at least lowering those barriers. I believe one of the reasons is that management, or infrastructure management and operations, is less of a burden, or in some cases it disappears entirely. So you have a team of engineers that are working, they're developers working directly with the infrastructure, and they are basically managing the infrastructure already, because they are creating environments, they are deploying, at least in their staging and testing environments. And in those cases, still many companies, they have a different team managing the production or different environments. Mm-hmm. But the problem that I have seen there is that at some point you need to have a single governance process, so you can make the team more work on a more efficient way, but also on improving security, right? Because at the end, everyone is having access to the same environments, everyone is having access to the infrastructure, and when you lose track of that governance, operations get very messy. On the other hand, it's still companies that haven't adopted cloud. I believe they are, or those kind of companies are the ones that are having that, like I will say, that approach. That is still development is one team. They are not necessarily connected all the time with operations. But even in those cases, most of the companies that we're talking, they're already thinking on how can we adopt cloud, and they are doing it already in some scenarios with databases, with storage, and in some cases with virtualizing environments for developers and testing, right? So I believe that's helping a lot to reduce the silos.
So do you think then that having an infrastructure environment that is more software based, like infrastructure as code, and adopting cloud, obviously that can be easier for teams to or organizations to kind of adopt this DevOps mindset and way of working. But do you think it's a catalyst for organizations that, if they adopt these cloud-based technologies, that they kind of come to realize that, DevOps actually kind of can simplify the process for them. It can kind of streamline things for them because they're, to your point, developers are kind of already in there doing it already with the cloud, doing the provisioning and such. So, do you think it kind of maybe turns a light bulb on, if you will, and helps organizations understand that, DevOps would be super beneficial for my organization, if for nothing else, to enable us to kind of streamline our operations and work more effectively?
Yes, definitely, and especially when they see that they are not longer having so many problems and difficulties on releasing software and maintaining stability in the development process, and reducing times for testing and regression, and not necessarily because they're already automated, but just because they have a single infrastructure, they have a single pipeline for integration and deployment when working with containers and working with infrastructure as code. That the business and the product owners, they definitely see the benefits of cloud and using those platform as a service or infrastructure as code and cloud native services. that definitely helps the organizations to understand the impact of DevOps and to start creating those bridges and communications among different teams in the company.
Okay. All right, great. So has your organization seen an increase in companies that are adopting DevOps, perhaps since the beginning of the pandemic as part of their digital transformation strategies?
Yes, and when we talk about DevOps, we usually come with a cloud strategy together with when we're helping our customers. So I will say that a lot of companies have come to us to work on how to improve their cloud strategy and how to migrate or accelerate their cloud migration. Those that have been in cloud, some of them haven't adopted the best practices, so haven't migrated to a DevOps set of processes and in some cases even cultural aspects that will change the way they work. So we started helping them on, okay, how can we manage their cloud strategy better? How can we manage the infrastructure? How can we implement these principles so your applications can be high performing, that your products can be developed in a data-driven way, that you can increase feedback loops in different groups and different from different areas and different components from the product, and how can you go faster when releasing new features to responding to the market needs, right? So we're helping them to improve that capability, and that's something that's super important. There, those that have been in the cloud for a while, now they are facing new questions. How can we improve governance? How can we improve cost management, right? So we're helping them in that. Those are a bit more mature. And we are seeing a lot of those cases in the market now. And then there are, of course, other companies that probably haven't taken that step to the cloud. And COVID definitely helped them and help us on accelerating that necessity from the companies that, they realize we have to be on cloud, right? In order to respond to the market needs and to scale our business, we definitely have to migrate to the cloud. So in those cases, we don't start with a DevOps transformation approach, but we start with showing them the benefits of cloud technology. And then, of course, in that process, showing them the benefits of automation and monitoring and continuous improving.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes a whole lot of sense. It's kind of like the whole chicken and egg question, right? You know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, DevOps or the cloud or DevOps? So interesting approach. Yeah.
Cloud makes DevOps easier. It's not necessarily that it comes first, because you can have a very robust culture and practices of DevOps, even if you're not on cloud. But cloud definitely makes things simpler for every company to adopt DevOps.
Yeah, we've definitely seen more migrations of organizations, moving to either hybrid environments or all cloud environments. So definitely in the DevOps space, the cloud has certain advantages that organizations just might not see if they have an all on-prem environment. So good stuff. Well, Annabelle, thank you very much for kind of walking me through what you guys are seeing in the space, and would love to have you back on TechStrong TV another time to talk a little bit about more, what your organization is doing and seeing in the DevOps space in general.
Thank you, Charlene. Happy to join again.
All right, great. Well, thanks again for joining me. All right, everybody, we have got lots more coming up on TechStrong TV, so please stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm here now with the webinars preview. As I always tell you, we have some amazing webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. But here are three that are coming up very quickly. Thought you might be interested in checking them out, so mark your calendar. First one is happening Wednesday, January 13th at 11 a.m. on DevOps.com. It is called DevOps Dependencies and Safe, Unifying Value Streams to Accelerate Delivery, and it's sponsored by Plutora. In this webinar, Helen Beal, who is the Chief Ambassador at DevOps Institute, and Jeffrey Keyes, who is the VP of Product at Plutora, they are going to discuss how to leverage value stream management and accelerate value delivery through DevOps while managing risk in our organization's scaled agile framework implementation. So they'll show you how scaled agile requires a systems thinking approach to value streams, as well as how to manage your DevOps evolution as part of a safe implementation, and how value stream management enables lean governance and flow of work optimization. Good stuff. Next up, we have creating a culture of chaos. Chaos engineering is not just tools, it's culture. It's happening Wednesday, January 13th at 3 p.m. on DevOps.com, and it is sponsored by Gremlin. So this webinar takes a look at the growing adoption of chaos engineering and how organizations can build out a chaos engineering practice and adopt a true blameless culture to maximize the potential of their teams. As part of the webinar, our speaker will be covering how to hold blameless postmortems, share postmortems with other teams, run regular fire drills, and automate chaos experiments for continuous validation. Okay, the third webinar is happening Thursday, January 14th at 1 p.m. It is called Getting Started with Runtime Security on Azure Kubernetes Service, and it is sponsored by Sysdig. Again, this one is happening Thursday, January 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This webinar will provide an overview of runtime security and take a look at approaches used by open source and commercial tools, and how users are getting started quickly without impacting developer productivity. Good stuff if you are using Azure Kubernetes Service, and it is definitely a topic worth checking out if you are in the cloud services game at all and security is a consideration for you. And really, when is security not a consideration for you? All right, that's all that I have for this edition of the webinars preview. Please check back on Thursday when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, please have a great day and stay safe. Hey, welcome back. Next up, we have Mitch Ashley talking with Tim Wilgig and Peter Fandel of Rocket Software. They talk about mainframe, open source, and lots more stuff. So let's listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm very happy to be joined by Imran Benetton, who is GM of Imperva Data Security. We've talked before, Ron. It's good to be speaking with you again.
Hey, Mitch. Nice to see you again.
As always, yes. Data and security, two of my favorite topics. Welcome to 2021.
Yeah, 2020 finally is over.
Ooh, it takes a pretty big rear view mirror to look at that, but I'm not sure I want to look back too much. Well, we're going to be kind of talking about, looking forward into this new year. First, would you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and also a little bit about Imperva?
Yeah, Imperva is kind of the market lead for data and application security. We secure all paths to data. So it kind of straddles between both covering how data is accessed and where data is accessed, kind of covering everything regardless of on-prem and cloud, hybrid cloud. And I am the GM for the data security side, and really glad to be here.
No small problem you're solving. Data is everywhere. You know, you don't have access to data.
Yeah.
There's not very many of them. So let's talk about, I mean, you know, we have the whole government breach in 2020, Russia, you know, Russia, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Certainly brought a lot of attention to supply chain attacks. Of course, you know, that being an intelligence brief, collecting a lot of data, right? Now that could, of course, happen on did happen on corporate networks, could be for, you know, financial gain. Doesn't mean it has to be a nation state attack. So I imagine that's going to be supply chain is a word we're going to hear a lot about this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, as a just an individual, my fear, by the way, is you know, there's a really big project coming for the entire world, which is the delivery of the vaccines, and that itself is a supply chain. I just hope nothing messes up there, you know, you know, knowing that whatever vaccine you're getting is actually the valid one and not, you know, there's a lot of, everything is in data and everything at the end sits in some kind of like, what's the lineage of something? What's the provenance of something? You know, it doesn't necessarily, you know, we in the data governance area talk a lot about provenance and proving the correctness of data, but it, you know, it goes all the way to the vaccine as well. So I think this issue that we're seeing, whether it's, you know, breaches get headlines, okay? And, you know, so, you know, this SolarWinds thing gets a big headline. The thing that, you know, these attacks on MySQL with ransomware, that get headlines. But really the bigger issue is, you know, getting control of our data and creating kind of a complete risk-oriented approach, not just plugging a hole here and plugging a hole here and plugging a hole here. That'll never work, right? It's much easier to create a new hole than to plug all the holes. So
the whack-a-mole strategy.
The whack-a-mole, yeah. The whack-a-mole doesn't work. Whack-a-mole doesn't work. And especially today when the complexity of the data environment is so much greater. You know, like 20 years ago, 40 years ago, we just had some database on the mainframe. 20 years ago, we just had Oracle sitting on some Unix server. Today, it's such a complex environment. Data moves from place to place. You know, you look at what a data lake implies. It's no longer a single stack. It's a combination of stacks. Whack-a-mole doesn't work. So, and most companies understand it. Most companies are in this process of investing in a non-whack-a-mole approach, in a risk-based approach that says, okay, I need to know where my data is. I need to prioritize which, you know, not all data is created equal. I need to scan, I need to understand, I need to know who has the ability to access something. I then need to know who is accessing something. I need to control what they're accessing. So, you know, I think there's a better understanding that whack-a-mole doesn't work. I think 2021 is still going to be a transition year. I don't think we're going to necessarily get there, but we're going to transition.
Don't have a universal enlightenment.
It just takes time. I mean, it takes time. There's a lot of data.
I want to ask you about, you did a nice job of kind of outlining, you know, identifying what data you have, prioritizing and access to it. One of the things that I've always struggled with is that second step. How do you prioritize? What are the things to consider? there's obviously sort of crown jewels of my business. This is the customer data or secret sauce or that kinds of things. But is there a good sort of stratification of how to prioritize data?
Okay. There's a technical answer and there's a human answer.
Okay.
Technically, there are very good ways to do this. It takes some effort. Okay, you really do this based on a scoring of a bunch of dimensions. Okay, so one dimension could be the sensitivity level of the data. Okay, another dimension could be what is the impact if something happens. Okay, but the reality is that we're all people, and people are driven by incentive, and incentive is not necessarily doesn't always necessarily create the right prioritization. It creates whatever prioritization the incentive is structured around. So I'll give you an example. A lot of projects going on around privacy, a lot of projects, because it's a relatively new thing, less understood. And people don't always equate the fact that, we have been doing the work, almost the identical work. We just didn't call it privacy, right? We called it classification. But when you look at what privacy implies, it's the same, but very new terminology, different semantics, different terminology. So many people don't start from an investment they've already done in the last 5 years. They start from scratch, and the incentives are created because there's a new role in the company. There may be a new, a data privacy officer, okay, and that person has certain mandates and they drive things top down. And so I think that the reality is prioritization is driven by the projects and the funding that these projects have. And they're also driven by breaches, okay, because breaches are very, dramatic,
response, right?
dramatic, immediately create. So I think that the reality is going to end up somewhere kind of in the middle, where things are going to be driven bottom up and top down, and they're going to meet somewhere. But it's not terribly complex to create a good prioritization strategy, but it's not trivial either.
Yeah, you definitely have to put some thought into it, and it's not a textbook exercise, right? It's all contextual.
And
what's important
and I think
to the
that
business.
you'll find in my prediction in 2021 is that there's going to be a lot of, privacy is not going to just drive a lot of these from a compliance perspective. Okay, until now, privacy is really, when a company embarks on these privacy and classification projects, or at least what I see from our customers, is that it's driven a lot by compliance. Okay, they need to comply with CCPA. They need to comply with GDPR. I think we might end up having also like an attack flavor, okay, around privacy, which is not necessarily intuitive. And it has to do with the fact that, part of the mandate is, so say that I am, you're one of my consumers, and I store some of your data. That means you have the right to demand some things from me. Like you have the right to demand that I delete you from my systems. You have the right for portability. You have the right to ask me what data do I own or do I store about you, and you can come to me with these requests. Okay, different terms, different subject rights request or data access requests. you could easily think about what is the effort that I, as a big company, have when you ask me to do this. It's not a small effort. So okay, if you now the nice thing is most people don't do that. Okay, I've never called somebody up and told them, hey, delete me. Okay.
No, I think that's probably very much an exception, maybe a rare exception.
Yeah. So, but what happens if some people realize that this is the way to cripple a company? Mm-hmm. What happens if they organize and they say, hey,
protest, right?
Protest.
Moving off Facebook, we don't like you, whatever, right?
Let's organize 10,000 of our friends and we'll all hit them at the same time. What do you think that's going to do from a work perspective? It's pretty serious.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's not just press a button. That's going to consume some resource at the company, people resource, things like that. Yeah. One thing I was wondering too is with this year, there's discussion now about do we need a national cybersecurity strategy, things like that. Just to mention politics, the Biden administration is talking about working with other countries to establish sort of norms of, what we do when it comes to, cyber whatever with each other and what is considered an attack. It seems like that is maybe not this year, but that's certainly potential for regulation of those kind of discussions, whether it comes out of any national strategy or not, or it could be another country that says, okay, now we're going to take this to the next level. Like what is our position around data, not just privacy, but if it's compromised and what happens to you as a firm. I mean, it could get kind of interesting.
Yeah, it could. Again, we're delving into like opinions and politics.
Yeah,
I'm not a fan of. I'm not sure that something like this could go that route, but I do think that it goes other routes. Like, so for example, I'm reading a book on kind of the history of the Mossad, okay, the Israeli intelligence service. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can see, and whenever you read any of these books, you see that all of the intelligence community, they have back channels, right? They agree on things. So to me, if we want to have something like that, it should be like the cyber czar of the U.S. and some other, the big players. They have to agree. It doesn't need to be regulated. It doesn't need to be at the politician level. It has to kind of stay at the
kind of behind the scenes with the cyber.
At the behind the scenes, at the experts, at the but there's definitely an issue with state nations. Okay, this does need to be addressed. Now, it's not necessarily that every. We always think that, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. We
would never do anything like that, what they did to us, right?
Well, there's examples in history, okay, of things. So I do think this is coming. I don't believe it would happen at a politician level. It will happen at the actual subject matter experts. And by the way, there are good examples of things that have happened like that, especially in the financial services community. I mean, for years, maybe even decades. Mm-hmm. FSIAC, they've been they work together to create some level of standards across like investment banks or banks. And these things work. I just don't think it's political.
Interesting. Well, I wanted to kind of tap your thoughts on that. I know I threw the line pretty far out there in the water just to kind of get your thoughts on that. Well, let's kind of reel that back in a little bit and talk, there's GDPR and CCAP for California. A lot of people are still in this kind of implementation stage, even though we're supposed to have those things all covered, right? Maybe a little farther along with GDPR, of course. But it seems, is that something this year you think we're in this? Okay, let's now institutionalize some of those things in the organizations and really, take care of our knitting there. Or do you think there's more things on the horizon that are going to come at data people?
I think it's gone into an implementation phase for sure, which is good. There's a lot of things. Many things are not terribly clear, by the way, even though it's an implementation. I'll give you an example. Right, this notion of being my ability to request that you delete me. Okay. But let's take something else, which is a different type of compliance requirement, which is for you to keep logs for a certain period of time, activity logs. There are a whole bunch of other compliance requirements require you to do that.
Data retention requirements. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now, what happens if part of the activity logs has my identity in it, and I request you to delete it? Should you delete it or should you not delete it? One, in order to comply with one thing, you should delete it. In order to comply with another thing, you can't delete it, maybe for 3 years. So there's even things like this, which are conflicting messages. And at the end of the day, it's going to depend on some level of interpretation, which at the implementation level, I can tell you, I can see two approaches. One is, okay, this interpretation needs to be given by legal, or it's okay for the business to give the interpretation to that. So, and you know how it is. If it goes to legal, it takes a longer time. If the business can make the decision, then it goes much faster. And I'm seeing more and more of this moving to the business taking ownership and making the decisions, in which case it goes much, much faster.
And oftentimes it seems that, that always happens with laws and regulations, right? There's what it is, and there's the interpretation of it. And there are sort of those middle tier organizations, the consultants, the larger firms, to sort of establish the frameworks that this is our interpretation of it. So if you do that, you're sort of in the norm with what the industry doing. Who knows if that's the right interpretation or not? It's always subject to change, but that's usually where that help comes from, at least on the big thing.
Yeah. I mean, it starts from there, and then usually what happens, or what it evolves to, which makes it really go much faster, which what's happening now, is that if and by the way, it goes back to your question about this nations coming together or an industry coming together. The minute you have some critical mass within a certain peer group, and you say, I don't know, maybe I'm an insurance company. If my peers have taken upon themselves a certain interpretation, I usually don't even care where they got it from. Okay? Maybe they got it from these consultants, maybe they got. But if three big players in my industry are doing the same thing, I'm going to do the same thing, and that's what's happening now. Is that, I know the insurance industry well, and I know the banking industry well, and I can see that they're now, we're going to do like them, and then it just, it's much easier to follow a track that seems to be proven than to try to invent it, and that's happening, and that's why I think there's an acceleration for.
Yeah, I agree with you. That makes a lot of sense. What are your other thoughts about 2021? What are we going to be thinking about we didn't realize that it's going to be on our radar for this year?
I think we are going to kind of understand this notion of, look at the data from every way that you can get at the data, not try to, like historically there have been like a focus on like pillars or silos, which were more and more, or in the past were driven really by tool specialization. Okay, I've got DLP, and I've got this, and I've got FAM, and I've got databases, and I've got big data, and today the lines are so blurred, especially on the cloud services are even more blurred, that there's starting to be a realization that we really need to look at all paths to the data and all ways to secure the data, and look at it instead of individual silos, looking at it at, this is my data fabric. Because you're starting to hear things like, data lakes, data fabric, data services, and the data service could be structured by different implementation stacks, but you're no longer trying to secure each stack by itself. You're trying to secure the entire fabric. Mm-hmm. And it's really the right thing to do. It's the right way to think about it. It is something that requires a transition, because even organizationally, many companies had, one group doing this and one group doing this and one group doing this. And this notion of, looking at a single overlay control layer, okay, which can drive policy down or can bring things up, is, it's time for that. And I think 2021 is going to be part of the part of this year is going to be starting to deliver things at that level of abstraction. And it's also enabled by the fact that there is technology that can kind of bubble everything up into one level, right? You don't need to look at this as 20 different tools. You need to look at it as kind of like a federated layer. And at least it's doable, right? 10 years ago, it wasn't doable to do any of that.
It's interesting. What it makes me think of is maybe some norms that we've had for a while of thinking about data owners, and that sort of puts the blinders on of, now I create that vertical view of, this is that data for that purpose, for that business unit, for that application or process, whatever it might be. And what you're saying is looking at it more systemically, right? The entire collection of data and securing it, but also uses of that data and sort of additional intelligence, the things you can mine from it. It's interesting. So much as we continue to move more and more into the digital economy, digital world for how we operate, all of those digital activities generate their own data too. So now we're adding that to the fabric of the data. We have a lot more usage information. We have a lot more telemetry that we never had. It seems to be expanding exponentially. So our ability to even just fathom what's there and what uses it might have and how it might be correlated in new ways sort of boggles my mind. Yeah. And, it used to be this, one of the things people used to talk about when they started building big data platforms was that, until recently, we couldn't use our data. We just threw 97% of our data away, and now we don't want to throw it away. But you're right; it's a beast that feeds itself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think looking at the risk profile of the entire thing and not cutting into separate projects, which then have no tie to each other, right? I mean, if you want to reduce the risk, you asked about prioritization. Okay, prioritization needs to drive everything, right? Needs to drive reducing surface area, needs to drive access control policies, needs to drive audit. If you start separating each one of them, not only is not very effective, but it means you're working 10 times harder because you need to do this many, many, many times. So this notion of a single kind of data security platform, which kind of can have this internal feedback loop and use whatever effort you're doing. It doesn't matter if your effort is driven by, compliance or security or privacy. Whatever investment you make needs to build into this platform, not do itself over the next time you do anything. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time. Well, it will never get done because you said the data is growing exponentially. If we're not leveraging what we're doing for one purpose when we want to do the next purpose,
we're going to lose. It's got to be a single platform.
Well, and to your point, it seems that once you sort of make that shift, right, to that platform view of data, now you can apply that to how you look at the data across all sources, all uses, all former kind of vertical siloed. You may still want to look at it that way, but it's not like, okay, now we figured it out for compliance, but we got to go start over to do it for something else, for operational process improvement or whatever. No, it's there. You kind of take those same tools and look at the data, analyze it. Now you've got that capability to do that for lots of things.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, it's like in the business world, there was always this notion of a customer 360, where what's the point that I have one system for quotes and one system for support and one system for my policy, and I never know what's going on, and I can't upsell and I can't cross sell. And it's the same thing in security. Okay, there's this notion of data security 360, where if it's there, then prioritization becomes easier, right? If you can check your configs and your vulnerabilities, okay, and you get this huge list, what are you going to do? But if you know that of this huge list, your consumer data is here, and that the crown jewels are here, great, you don't have to boil the ocean. And if at the same time you can bring in and you can check your entitlements and you can say, well, I have this vulnerability and it is important data, but I did a really good job at narrowing it down, and access to it is only, by these individual, and access is Kerberized, and I don't know, and maybe I also regulate the policy very tightly. These are all related. Okay, so if you have that single platform, you're in much better shape than it's like I'm trying to think of a metaphor of when you have a single viewpoint, that viewpoint may be wrong. It's kind of like this all of today's these days, this discussion about whether news means anything anymore, because it's so tailored to what you want to hear. But it's kind of like somebody forcing you to go and watch Fox and CNN and NPR, and you must watch all of these before you make a decision. It's the same way. We can't reduce risk by just looking at one thing at a time.
Yeah, we certainly have our own selection bias in data as we do our news programming.
Yes,
as well,
exactly.
Right? Well, it's been a lot of fun talking with you. Just to have a sense, 2021 is already off to a good start with vaccines and, the COVID situation. Hopefully. We'll round that hump and folks can really figure out new ways of collaborating with each other without worrying about COVID. Maybe that day's down the path, not too far, but we hope anyway. Yes. So it's been fascinating talking with it. Tell us, so we didn't talk about, going to product stuff. It wasn't that conversation, but tell us a little bit about where folks can find out more about Imperva.
So Imperva.com, we are, if we're talking about data security, then, there's a whole section there, and you'll see that we're investing a lot in things that we believe 2021 and our customers are implementing. So a lot of kind of complete security, whether it's for compliance, security, privacy, a lot of effort in privacy. A lot of effort around data lakes, everything around cloud, any cloud that you can think of, or any data service, any data-centric workload on the cloud is something that we've worked very hard with the cloud vendors to provide support for. And yeah, I think 2021 is going to be an exciting year because of this modernization that everybody's embarking on, and my hope, and what we're trying to do with Imperva, is that the path of modernization is also of modernization for, for the applications and for functionality also brings with it modernization of security.
And thinking about our conversation before of, the response to regulation and policies and things like that, of looking at what other leaders do. Imperva works with some very impressive companies who are working, just solving the data challenge, from a platform standpoint. So there's a lot of good reasons to check out Imperva, because there's a lot of problems you're solving on the advance that could help a lot of organizations. So I hope people will do that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mitch. Always great to talk.
You bet. Good to talk with you, Ron. And thanks everybody for listening in. It's been a great conversation, and wish all of you a great 2021 as well.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hey, all right, welcome back. At our final segment today, we have Mike Vizard speaking with AppNeta CEO Matt Stevens, talking about remote work and network performance. So let's give this final interview a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with James Smith, who's the CEO for Bugsnag. They make some tools that help you monitor your code for errors, and they have a new report. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So I looked at the report, and it says, as I understand it anyway, that the median stability for mobile apps is 99.63%, and the median stability for web apps is 99.39%. And I'm thinking maybe developers should be doing a little happy dance, but maybe not so fast. So explain this to me.
Yeah, well, I think if you're used to measuring these numbers, maybe you have an idea of what they mean, but most people aren't measuring the software stability in a score like this. I think that if you're familiar with the availability metrics, like 5 nines of availability or uptime that site reliability engineers and DevOps teams almost certainly are looking at or striving for, you'll notice there's a lot fewer 9s on those numbers than you get with the availability or uptime. And that's really where the problem comes in. I think that it's difficult to understand numbers with a lot of 9s in sometimes. And in reality, you want that to be as close to 5 plus 9s as possible to reduce the number of poor experiences for your customers. So one way of thinking about this is, 99.3 means that you're seeing more 7 out of 1,000 customers seeing a crash. You're spending money on developing software, and 7 out of 1,000 customers are seeing an unstable experience. Maybe they're buying that hot ticket expensive item on your e-commerce website, or maybe they are your key customer that's about to click renew on your SaaS product, or maybe they're buying an in-game transaction in game, and that means that they're going to churn out and not buy that next time round. It's 7 out of 1,000 customers. If they came into your target store and got kicked out straight away, you'd call that a failing experience.
So Murphy's Law would dictate that one of those 7 is going to be my most important customer of the day or the week or whatever it's going to be.
Right, exactly. And even more painful than that is that consumers tend to be quite vocal and quite loud. And again, like, it's a silly analogy to make, but if you walked into Walmart and you got kicked out because they're like, no, you can't come into our store, you're going to go and post about that on social media, and you're going to go and tell your friends, and that's going to do a lot of brand damage as well. You're not going to want to come back into that Walmart ever again. So yeah, not just individual transactions at risk, almost paying valuable customers, but also, hey, you don't want to turn people away at the door. This is going to hurt your brand reputation.
You guys also looked at Apple and Android and what the platforms were. So what did you guys discover about the reliability of apps on those two platforms? Is there a big difference?
There's a meaningful difference, a statistically significant difference. And it's kind of not surprising here. The Android applications have to run in a lot more varied environments. And so unsurprisingly, our report found that Android applications are less stable, slightly less stable than iOS applications. But again, this wasn't something that necessarily surprised us. There are stability issues that are caused by code changes. Hey, we did this change in our code, and that caused a bug to happen to everyone who's running the application. And then there's stability issues that may not have been shaken out because of differences in environment that you're running the software in. So, I'm not sure how many versions of the iPhone are out there, but there's probably 100 different versions of the iPhone since the launch of the iPhone, something like that. But on the Android side of things, there are tens of thousands of Android devices out there. And almost certainly you're not going to even scratch the surface on testing your software on all of those devices. Also, that fragmented device differences are compounded by the fact that Android phone sellers, manufacturers, typically change the operating system themselves. You'll see this if you've ever looked at a Samsung phone versus an LG phone. They look very different. Sure, it's core Android, but those manufacturers have futzed around with the software that makes up the operating system. And so your software is not running in a clean room environment on all of these devices. Now, that's a general problem on client-side software development, but it's certainly compounded on Android, where there are tens of thousands of different types of device out there compared to the relatively sanitized world of iOS software development.
The other thing that caught my eye in this report is that React frameworks were a little less stable than other frameworks. Is that a maturity issue, or is that the nature of the way the React applications are built, or what went into that?
Yeah, if you see in the report, there's a real bad offender was Backbone.js in particular, and I think that was mainly because this is an old framework, an old JavaScript framework. React, compared to some of the other JavaScript frameworks that we looked at, it wasn't too poorly performing. It wasn't a bad offender, but I think that a lot of the time it depends on features of the framework. Now, I'll talk about Backbone again briefly. Backbone was this way of building a JavaScript application really from scaffold, right? It gave you the raw parts to build a JavaScript application. It didn't really have an opinion about things. And so again, there was no surprise that we saw that Backbone.js apps were a lot less stable than some of the more modern frameworks. The differences between the Reacts and the Embers and the Angulars of the world was a lot less stark, but there were differences. And in my mind, that's, I think, partly due to the fact that some of these platforms have opinions about error handling and some don't. There are built-in, baked-in error handling capabilities of some of these JavaScript frameworks. React has some error handling capabilities, but not all developers have adopted these. There's something called an error boundary in React that, it's been out for a couple of years now, but not every React developer has adopted this concept. And the idea there is, when you're writing user interface, front-end application, errors can bubble out from component context. So you probably want to know if an error happened in the button versus just on the whole page. And so if you're using features of the framework like a React error boundary, you're more likely to see more errors bubble up. Otherwise, you're sticking your fingers in your ears and not hearing about them potentially.
Well, that works for some people. However, one of the things also in the report that stood out to me a little bit was size apparently matters in terms of the engineering teams that are at work here and the stability. So what's the correlation there?
Yeah, we saw, again, when we saw the shape of the curve, we initially were like, uh-oh, that's weird. And then we're like, no, that's exactly what we expected. When you are, if you look at the report, we segmented by number of engineers in the company, and that's good proxy for how many people are working on the code base. And what we typically see is if you are a really, really, really small team, 1 to 10, you're going to have the worst experience. You're going to have the highest crash rate. One of the things is that makes a lot of sense when you think about it is probably if you're a small team, you're probably a young company, and you tend to want to take more risks earlier in the company. You don't have so many established practices around how stable should your software be, what are our goals, what are our targets, and also it's a factor of your go-to market approach. It might be that you're saying, look, let's ship software as quick as possible because we don't know if anyone's going to pay for this yet. You know, if you're a startup, it might be a wild and wonderful idea that you don't know if anyone's going to use yet. So it's okay to have some acceptable risk earlier on in the business. So when you're a smaller company, typically it means you're a younger company and you see more risks being taken. So again, no surprises there. And this kind of curve goes up and you can see as the company starts to get bigger, stability score improves. One of the surprising things that we saw, and again, it was obvious in hindsight after we looked at this data, once you get to very large companies, 1,000 plus software engineers, your stability starts to drop again. You don't start to have that improvement anymore. And again, it's not surprising. This is something we've seen with the customers that we work with. When you have hundreds or thousands of software engineers working in code bases, it's very, very difficult to maintain standards of quality. And in addition to that, if you have that larger team, almost certainly you're working on a mature product and an older code base. And as you know, technical debt accrues over time and it sneaks up on you. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to me that we would see small teams take a lot of risk, see higher crash rate and lower stability. It improves over time as you build rigor and process into your teams, but it falls apart once you get an older code base or a much larger engineering team. So that's exactly the results we saw in the report.
We hear a lot of people talking about digital business transformation these days. Almost invariably that involves a web app or a mobile app, and they're building out more of these apps than ever. Do you think that for maybe they're in danger of having all this stuff come back and bite them in the butt a little bit because these stability issues are going to be out there? The more apps they build, and they may not have the right number of engineers, they may have too many projects going at the same time. Do people need to think that through, or is it just kind of the Wild West and we're hoping for the best?
Well, it really depends on the type of company you're building, but you're right that there's tech forward companies, there's technology companies that we understand and know that exist only on the web or mobile. Like the Airbnbs of the world exist purely on the internet. For the companies that are, especially within the last year, have been forced online, who are traditional businesses that have to move their storefront online, it's difficult because if you aren't a technical expert, you don't know how to build these processes. Sure, you can work with a consultancy, you can speak with the analysts to find best practices, but you're effectively having to build your technical expertise from scratch. One of the issues there is that the people on the commercial side of the business, the decision makers, don't necessarily understand what stability or performance or availability mean. And they might be shown a beta version of the application that works on their brand new iPhone. The CEO gets a copy and they're like, great, the Burger King application looks great. I can order a burger on here. But most of the people out there aren't using that same device, or maybe they're going into a lot more depth and finding more bugs that the CEO didn't find. So the CEO, maybe when they click the launch button and they do that in huge marketing spend to launch the new version of your application, hey, you can now buy on our app. They don't know what the risks are when they're clicking go and taking that out to their customer base because they are not experts in technology. So I think that I don't think it's necessarily a Wild West intentionally. I think that there's just a lot of people who are having to go through that learning curve in a really accelerated period of time. And there's a lot of demand for bringing in seasoned CIOs and CTOs at the moment. And so can you find that person in time to do your digital transformation? So yeah, I think that everyone's going through that change right now as a matter of a forcing function over the last year. And that's not slowing down and that's not going away. And I think that the nuances of talking to your customers through a different storefront, I think are going to have to be learned by all of these organizations, especially on e-commerce. E-commerce is going to be, I made the analogy at the beginning of the conversation about there would be an uproar from the CEO if people were turned away at the door from your storefront, from Target or Walmart or whatever. And that's effectively what's happening when you have software issues that aren't addressed.
Do you think more organizations will adopt best DevOps practices to manage all that? Because when I look at it, it looks to me at least that things are getting more complex, not less. There's more APIs. People are throwing around microservices now. There's front ends and back ends. How do I keep all this stuff synchronized?
I think that there's the best practices in terms of how you build your software, and then the best practices of how you run and monitor your software. And I think the latter is far behind the former. There's been for people who are savvy, companies that are savvy, they are adopting DevOps best practices and they've adopted CI/CD and they've moved from waterfall to agile and all of the stuff that we've been talking about for years. A lot of that has happened already, and that's been trained and ingrained into CIO, CTOs' minds. But I think that the feedback loop is missing. So the feedback loop is almost the purest way of looking at this. What goals are we setting for our digital experience? Do we want to have X people using our product? Out of those people, what percentage do we want to have a good experience? How are we going to prove that they did or didn't have a good experience? So I think that one of the risks of the transitions over the past 5-10 years is that people have been sold the dream. The dream has introduced a lot of complexity, as you say, but we haven't set our goals necessarily. Also, goal setting you mentioned this earlier, the digital storefront is the client side. Yes, you've got all these microservices and APIs and serverless and stuff happening behind the scenes. But arguably, DevOps and SRE teams and sysadmins have had quite a long time to build best practices and goals there. Web technologies on the back end have been around for quite a long time. Yes, they've evolved. Yes, they're very different. But most teams have a concept of an error rate. Even looking at what percentage of your customers are seeing a 500 error. That's a pretty baked in best practice by now. What I think a lot of people aren't doing is thinking about that from the customer's perspective. They're thinking about it from the code perspective or the infrastructure perspective, but not from the customer's perspective, which is where the customer is touching the code, which is the client side. So I think that adopting these things, best practices, has been great. I think it's more complex than people expected. And I think that people haven't done it necessarily in a way where they understand the repercussions of that. So the complexity does lead to issues, but customer experience, I think, is the one where we're not thinking about the most.
Do you worry at all that we're experimenting on customers in real time and throwing apps out there and developers are like, well, if they don't like it, we'll just fix it in the next run? And I'm not sure that's any way to run a railroad. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely industry dependent. I started my career working in financial technology, and before that I worked in embedded software, writing software for medical pumps. Now, writing software for medical pumps, it's safety critical. There are no bugs. Or if you're writing software for the space shuttle or whatever it is, there's a risk tolerance slider that you have to set in your business. I do think that experimentation, there's this phrase that I hate called testing in production, and it's a hot phrase at the moment. I just don't think it's a very respectful way of talking about this. I think if you're intentional about the way you're rolling out software to customers, I think it is an asset to be able to take a little bit of risk on board. So what I mean by that is, like, again, if you're a bank or you're the space shuttle or if you're a medical pump, you probably want to have a very tight risk tolerance. You want to make sure that you're not sending poor software to your customers because it could cost lives or millions of dollars or whatever. But if you're a startup and you're trying to figure out if people want to use this product, it is a competitive benefit for you to be able to ship software and features faster because you don't have an established business model necessarily yet. You might beat your competition to market. I think that a good way of doing that, and again, if you're doing this intentionally, is to do intentional phased rollouts. So people have been running beta programs for a long time. What I've really liked recently is self opt-in for beta programs. And on mobile, this is very prevalent. If you are an Android user, for example, you can go to the Google Play Store. Certain companies will say opt into the beta program. You can click one button. You don't have to fill in a form or anything. So you're saying, hi, company, I have a higher risk tolerance and I want the features now. And so you are allowing the customer to opt into that riskier beta experience. That's a really good way of doing it. You're not forcing poor quality software on your customers. Another way of doing it is to do fast automated rollouts and rollbacks. A lot of companies are using experiment or feature flags now at scale. If you're using built your own homegrown feature flagging system, or if you're using something like Launch Darkly or Split, these are off-the-shelf feature flagging systems. What you can do is you can turn on certain features or parts of your code base to a subset of your customer base. Again, if you do that, you have to have a feedback loop. Are those customers that you're giving this new feature to having a worse experience than the control set, the rest of the customer base? And if you do that and measure it correctly, you can see if there are defects and then automatically turn off those feature flags because they're controlled by a kill switch on a remote server. It's not like you have to then force the customer to upgrade to version 2 of your application and give them a poor experience. So again, be intentional about it and it's okay, and know where you are on that risk profile slider. I think it can generate huge improvements in competitiveness and getting features to your customers faster.
All right. It's just like going to Vegas, only risk what you can afford to lose, right?
Exactly.
All right. Hey, James, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, that wraps up today's TechStrong TV broadcast. Lots of great interviews. Hope everybody was able to join us, and I hope that you're able to join us for the next live episode, which will be tomorrow. Until then, I hope everybody has a great week, or great rest of the week, but a great day today, and we will see you back here, same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow. Until then, stay safe.